The police cruiser's lights painted Marcus Jefferson's driveway in alternating red and blue as he stood there, grease still under his fingernails from a 12-hour shift, watching his neighbor Brenda Wilson point an accusatory finger at him while screaming, "Thief!" into her phone. His crime owning a car too nice for her to believe a black mechanic could afford. But what Brenda didn't know was that Marcus had been documenting her reign of terror for months, and this false police report would be the thread that unraveled her entire criminal empire. If you want to see how one mechanic brought down the most corrupt HOA president in suburban history, watch until the end and drop a comment about what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories of justice travel. The August heat shimmered off the asphalt of Willowbrook Estates as Marcus Jefferson pulled his work van into his driveway, exhausted after replacing 3 transmissions since dawn. His shirt clung to his back with honest sweat, the kind that came from real work, not the gym memberships and yoga classes that dominated his suburban neighborhood. At 35, Marcus had calluses that told stories each one earned in his family's auto shop that had served the community since his grandfather opened it in 1962. "Long day, Mr. J," called out Timothy Chen from across the street, watering his prized roses despite the water restrictions that nobody seemed to follow anyway. Marcus waved back, managing a tired smile. "You know it, Tim, but Friday means cold beer and quality time with my baby." Timothy laughed knowingly. Everyone in the neighborhood knew about Marcus's baby, the 1967 Camaro SS that lived under a custom cover in his garage. It wasn't just a car. It was a legacy rebuilt bolt by bolt with his late father over 15 years. Every weekend, weather permitting, Marcus would open that garage door and spend hours detailing what was already perfect, playing Motown classics, while neighbors walking their dogs would stop to admire the pristine rally red paint and twin racing stripes. Marcus punched in the garage door code, anticipating that familiar satisfaction of seeing his masterpiece. The door rose slowly, dramatically, like a theater curtain revealing the star of the show. There she sat, 350 cubic inches of American muscle chrome bumpers catching the late afternoon sun like mirrors. He just had her appraised last month for insurance purposes, $85,000, though no amount of money could capture what she really meant to him. "Every dent you hammer out, every part you restore, you're not just fixing metal," his father had told him during their last summer together, hands deep in the engine bay. "You're preserving history, son, keeping stories alive." Marcus grabbed a microfiber cloth from his workbench, ready to wipe away imaginary dust when he heard it. The sharp, commanding voice that could strip paint at 50 yards. "Yes, 911. I need police here immediately. There's a black man stealing a car right in front of me." Marcus froze, cloth in hand. Through his open garage, he could see Brenda Wilson, HOA president, and self-appointed neighborhood watchdog standing in his driveway with her phone pressed to her ear, her other hand pointing directly at him. "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm." The dispatcher's voice was barely audible through Brenda's phone speaker. "Can you describe what's happening?" "He's in a garage with a classic car, obviously stolen. These people always... there's no way someone like him could afford something like that." The microfiber cloth fell from Marcus's hand. "These people." The words hung in the air like smoke from burning rubber. "Brenda," Marcus called out, keeping his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. "This is my car. In my garage. At my house." She spun around, her bottle blonde hair whipping dramatically, her designer workout outfit that had never seen actual exercise pristine as always. "Don't you move, the police are on their way. For what, standing in my own garage?" But Brenda had already turned back to her phone voice rising to performance levels. "He's getting aggressive. Please hurry." Marcus knew better than to move. He'd had the talk from his father when he was 12, the same one every black parent gave their children. Don't make sudden movements. Keep your hands visible. Be polite, even when they're not. Stay alive. 3 minutes later, Marcus counted every second 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing, but sirens off. 4 officers emerged, hands resting on their service weapons. The lead officer, a younger white man with sergeant stripes, approached cautiously. "Sir, I need you to step out of the garage slowly and keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus complied, muscle memory from too many similar encounters taking over. "Officer, this is my house. That's my car. My name is Marcus Jefferson, and I live here." He's lying, Brenda interjected, practically bouncing with excitement. I'm the HOA president, and I know everyone in this neighborhood. That car was not there this morning. Because it was at my shop getting new brake pads, Marcus said calmly. I own Jefferson Automotive on Maple Street. Just brought her home an hour ago. The sergeant looked between them, clearly trying to assess the situation. Sir, do you have any proof that this vehicle belongs to you? Registration's in the glove box, title's in my home office, insurance papers too. Hell, I've got photos of me and my dad building her from a rust bucket in 1995. Anyone can forge documents, Brenda snapped. She'd moved closer now, close enough that Marcus could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the wine she'd clearly been drinking. Officers, I demand you run the plates. You'll see this vehicle is stolen. The sergeant nodded to one of his officers who walked to the Camaro and called in the plates. Marcus stood there, hands still visible, feeling the eyes of gathering neighbors. Timothy Chen had put down his hose. The Martinson family from 2 houses down had stopped their evening walk. Curtains twitched in windows up and down the street. Sergeant, the officer called back. Vehicle is registered to Marcus Jefferson at this address. No theft reports, clean record. Marcus felt a small relief, but he knew this dance wasn't over. Can I lower my hands now? The sergeant nodded, looking embarrassed. Mr. Jefferson, I apologize for the inconvenience. Seems to be a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, Brenda's voice pitched higher. Check again. Run his license. There has to be something. Ma'am, the sergeant turned to her, his patience visibly thinning. Filing a false police report is a crime. False. I'm protecting this neighborhood. Do you know who I am? I'm Brenda Wilson. My husband is Gerald Wilson of Wilson, Krensky and Associates. I'll have your badge. The sergeant's jaw tightened, but he maintained his professional composure. Ma'am, I suggest you return to your home. Mr. Jefferson, again, I apologize. As the police cars pulled away, Brenda stood in Marcus's driveway, her face red with rage and humiliation. The gathered neighbors began to disperse, but not before Marcus caught their expressions. Some sympathetic, others uncomfortable, a few clearly enjoying seeing Brenda taken down a notch. This isn't over, Brenda hissed low enough that only Marcus could hear. You don't belong here. Marcus looked at her steadily. I've been here 6 years, Brenda. Paid cash for this house after selling my dad's shop property. Never missed an HOA payment. Never had a violation. So tell me, what exactly is it about me that doesn't belong? She didn't answer, couldn't answer without saying what they both knew she meant. Instead, she stormed off her heels, clicking against the pavement like an angry typewriter. Marcus went back into his garage, picked up the dropped microfiber cloth, and began polishing his Camaro's hood. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from rage, carefully controlled. Timothy Chen appeared at the garage entrance holding 2 beers. Figured you could use one of these, Tim said, offering a Corona with a lime wedge already inserted. Marcus accepted gratefully, taking a long pull. Thanks, man. That was some bullshit, Tim said simply. Everyone knows that car's yours. Hell, my kid's got a poster of it on his wall from when you brought it to the school's career day. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun start its descent behind the identical roof lines of Willowbrook Estates. It was a nice neighborhood, Marcus had to admit. Tree-lined streets, good schools, the kind of place where kids still rode bikes and neighbors theoretically looked out for each other. He'd moved here for exactly those reasons, wanting something different from the rougher neighborhood where he'd grown up, where his shop had been broken into 3 times in 1 year. You know she's not going to let this go, Tim finally said. Marcus nodded. I know. What Marcus didn't know was that Brenda Wilson had already gone inside and opened her laptop. Fingers flying across the keyboard as she logged into the HOA management system. If she couldn't get him arrested, she'd find another way. The screen glowed in her home office, a room that cost more to furnish than most people's entire houses, as she pulled up Marcus Jefferson's property file. Let's see, she muttered to herself. Wine glass refilled and lipstick staining its rim. Grass height, mailbox specifications. Trash can placement, vehicle restrictions. She smiled the kind of smile that would have sent chills down Marcus's spine if he'd seen it. Tomorrow was Saturday, which meant she had the whole weekend to document every possible violation. And if she couldn't find any real ones, well, the HOA bylaws were so complex and contradictory that she could always create some. Meanwhile, Marcus finished his beer with Tim. They talked about the upcoming football season, and Tim's son Kevin came over to ask Marcus about carburetor adjustments for his science project. It was a normal suburban evening, the kind Marcus had hoped for when he'd bought this house. But as he helped Kevin understand the principles of fuel-air mixture, part of his mind was already preparing for what he knew was coming. His father had taught him many things in that garage beside the shop: how to gap spark plugs, how to read diagnostic codes, how to true a wheel. But perhaps the most important lesson was this: documentation beats conversation, son, every time. When someone's coming for you, and trust me, someone always is, you better have your paperwork straight. That night, after Kevin and Tim had gone home after he'd grilled a simple dinner and watched the news, Marcus sat at his computer and created a new folder, HOA Issues. He didn't know it yet, but that folder would eventually contain over 500 files and would become evidence in a federal investigation. The next morning came too soon and too bright. Marcus woke to the sound of a camera clicking. Through his bedroom window, he could see Brenda on the sidewalk, telephoto lens aimed at his front yard. He grabbed his phone and started recording. "Morning, Brenda," he called out, opening his front door. "Beautiful day for photography." She lowered the camera, smirking. "HOA business, Mr. Jefferson. Your grass appears to be 3.5 inches. Regulation height is 3 inches maximum. You measured my grass. It's my responsibility as HOA president to ensure all residents maintain property standards." She held up a ruler, actually held up a ruler like this was normal behavior. "I'll be issuing a formal warning. Third warning results in a fine." This would be my first warning. "No, Mr. Jefferson. You received warnings on March 15th and May 22nd. Marcus frowned. "I never received any warnings. They were sent via HOA mail system. Not my fault if you don't check your messages." Marcus pulled out his phone, still recording, and opened the HOA app. No messages. He showed her the screen. "Nothing here." Brenda's smile widened. Technical issues, perhaps. But the warnings were issued. Check your spam folder. She walked away, heels aerating his lawn with each step. Marcus checked his spam folder, nothing. But when he logged into the HOA website on his computer, he discovered something interesting. In the system logs visible only because of a glitch in the portal's code, he could see that Brenda had backdated 2 warnings that morning at 5:47 a.m. "Got you," he muttered, taking screenshots. The doorbell rang. Marcus opened it to find a young man in a city inspector uniform looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Jefferson, I'm here about a complaint regarding improper disposal of automotive fluids." "Excuse me." The inspector, his badge red, Tom Hastings, shifted his weight. "We received a report that you're dumping oil and coolant in your backyard." Marcus stepped aside. "Come on in, Tom. Let me show you my garage." He led the inspector through his house, noting how Tom's eyes widened at the pristine interior, the family photos, the framed certifications from ASE hanging in the hallway. In the garage, Marcus showed him the proper waste disposal containers, each labeled and sealed, waiting for the monthly hazmat pickup he paid extra for. "I run an automotive shop, Tom. EPA compliance is drilled into my skull. I've got manifests for every fluid ounce I've disposed of in the last 5 years. Tom nodded, making notes. "I can see that. Listen, between you and me, this is the 3rd complaint we've gotten about you this week. Someone really has it out for you." 3 complaints. Illegal business operation, improper chemical storage, and now this. All anonymous, but, Tom lowered his voice, they all came from the same IP address. Marcus walked Tom out, thanked him for his professionalism, and immediately called his lawyer. Not that he had one yet, but his cousin Deshaun was a paralegal and would know someone. "Marcus, man, you need to start building a case," Deshaun told him that afternoon over lunch at their grandmother's house. "This sounds like harassment, possibly discrimination. Start documenting everything." "Already on it." "No, I mean everything. Every interaction, every time she looks at you sideways. Video if possible. Save every email, every text. And Marcus," Deshaun leaned in, "check if she's doing this to anyone else." That evening, Marcus knocked on Timothy Chen's door. "Hey, Tim, weird question. You ever have any issues with Brenda HOA violations, complaints?" Tim's expression darkened. "Come in. You need to meet some people." What followed was Marcus's introduction to what Tim called the club, a group of homeowners who'd been targeted by Brenda Wilson over the past 3 years. There was Janet Morrison, a single mother who'd been fined for her children's bikes being visible from the street. The Patels, who'd received violations for the smell of curry during their daughter's birthday party. Old Mr. Rodriguez, whose American flag was deemed too large, despite being regulation size. "She measures the distance between fence posts," Janet said, exhausted. "She times how long trash cans stay on the curb. She once fined me because my daughter drew hopscotch squares on our driveway with chalk." "Why hasn't anyone challenged her?" Marcus asked. "We have," Mr. Rodriguez replied. "But she controls the board. Her husband's law firm represents the HOA pro bono. Fighting her means fighting professional lawyers with unlimited resources." Marcus looked around the room at these tired faces, good people who just wanted to live their lives in peace. "What if we fought back differently?" "What do you mean?" Priya Patel asked. "She's so focused on finding violations, but what about her? Has anyone ever checked if she's following her own rules?" The room went quiet. Tim slowly smiled. "You know, in 5 years I've never seen anyone inspect her property." "Then maybe it's time someone did," Marcus said. That Sunday, while Brenda was at her weekly wine club, which everyone knew about because she posted about it constantly on the neighborhood Facebook page, Marcus and Tim took a casual walk past her house. Just 2 neighbors out for a stroll, completely normal, except Marcus had his phone recording in his pocket and Tim had a measuring tape in his. What they found was interesting. Brenda's grass was 4.2 inches tall. Her trash cans were still on the curb at 2 p.m., 4 hours past the deadline. Her fence had been recently extended without visible HOA approval stamps. And most interestingly, she had 4 vehicles in her driveway. The HOA limit was 3. "The 4th one's probably her son's," Tim noted. "He visits from college." "Still a violation by her own rules," Marcus replied. They documented everything carefully, methodically. But Marcus knew this wasn't enough. Petty violations wouldn't stop someone like Brenda. He needed something bigger. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus was at his shop the following Tuesday, elbow deep in a Corolla's engine bay when Mrs. Patterson walked in. She was 73, drove a 1988 Buick LeSabre that Marcus had been keeping running for the past 5 years, and lived 3 houses down from him in Willowbrook. "Marcus, dear, I need to tell you something," she said, looking around nervously. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, concerned. "Everything okay, Mrs. P?" "It's about that Wilson woman. I was at the bank yesterday and I overheard something. My hearing aid was acting up, making everything louder, and she was in the next cubicle talking to a loan officer." Marcus pulled up a chair for her. "What did you hear?" "She was trying to get a home equity loan. Said she needed it for HOA improvements, but the banker asked about some irregularities in the HOA account she'd submitted." "Irregularities, Mrs.?" Patterson leaned in conspiratorially. "Large cash withdrawals, monthly, going back 2 years. The banker said he couldn't approve the loan without an audit." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "Mrs. P, you're sure about this?" "Clear as day. She got real upset, said her husband would call the bank president. Then she stormed out." After Mrs. Patterson left with her Buick running smoothly, Marcus called to Sean. "I need you to find out how to request an HOA financial audit." "You think she's embezzling?" "I think someone taking that much cash from HOA funds might be desperate enough to force people out of their homes. Think about it, if she's stealing, she needs more money coming in, higher HOA fees, more fines, or getting people to sell so she can collect real estate commissions," Deshaun finished. "Holy shit, Marcus, you know she's a licensed realtor, right?" Marcus didn't know that, but it made sense. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. That evening, Marcus was reviewing the HOA bylaws when his doorbell rang. He opened it to find 2 police officers, different ones from the previous week. "Mr. Jefferson, we've received a complaint about a threatening confrontation." Marcus sighed. "Let me guess. Brenda Wilson." The officers exchanged glances. "The complainant wishes to remain anonymous, but they claim you approached them aggressively and made verbal threats." "When was this supposed to have happened?" This afternoon around 3 p.m. Marcus pulled out his phone, showed them his GPS history. I was at my shop until 5:30. Here's the timeline, and I've got security footage showing me there all day. Want me to call my employees who were with me? The older officer looked tired. Sir, this is the fourth call we've gotten about you this month. We're required to respond, but... He looked around, then lowered his voice. Maybe you should consider filing a harassment complaint of your own. After they left, Marcus sat on his porch thinking. The Camaro sat in the garage, covered now. He didn't want to give Brenda any more ammunition, but hiding wasn't in his nature. His grandfather had marched for civil rights. His father had built a business from nothing, and Marcus fixed things for a living. It was time to fix this. He started with the HOA Facebook page. Brenda ran it like her personal kingdom, deleting posts. She didn't like banning residents who questioned her. But she'd made a mistake. She'd added her son as an admin when he was home from college, and he'd forgotten to remove his ex-girlfriend Chloe, who still lived with her parents in Willowbrook. Marcus had fixed Chloe's Honda Civic last year after a fender bender. She was a sweet kid working at Starbucks while finishing community college. He sent her a message. Hey Chloe, strange question. You still have admin access to the HOA Facebook? Her response was quick. OMG, Mr. J, yes. Brett never removed me. His mom is such a witch. Why? Can you download the audit log? Shows all deleted posts and banned members. Already on it. She's been deleting so much stuff. Sending now. What Chloe sent was a goldmine. Hundreds of deleted posts, complaints about missing funds, questions about budget allocations, concerns about selective enforcement. And the banned list read like a map of Willowbrook's diversity. The Nguyen's, the Johnsons, the Garcias, the Alis. Every family that didn't fit Brenda's vision of what the neighborhood should look like. But it was a deleted post from 8 months ago that caught Marcus's attention. Former HOA treasurer Ronald Morse had posted requesting emergency board meeting to discuss $47,000 discrepancy in reserve fund. This is the third discrepancy this year. We need an external audit immediately. Ronald Morse had moved out of Willowbrook 2 months later. According to the realtor records Marcus found online, his house had sold for $60,000 below market value. The buyer. An LLC called BW Holdings. The selling agent, Brenda Wilson. Got you, Marcus whispered. He called Tim Chen. Emergency club meeting, my house tonight. They gathered in Marcus's living room. Tim and his wife, Amy the Patels, Janet Morrison, Mr. Rodriguez, and surprisingly 3 new faces, the Nguyens, the Johnsons, and Maria Garcia. Word's getting around that you're standing up to her, Maria explained. She fined me $500 because my daughter's quinceañera was too loud. It ended at 9 p.m. Marcus laid out what he'd discovered. The deleted posts, the suspicious house sale, the cash withdrawals Mrs. Patterson had overheard. The room was silent for a moment, processing. We need more evidence, said Amy Chen, who worked as a forensic accountant. If we're going to accuse the HOA president of embezzlement, we need bulletproof documentation. How do we get that? Janet asked. We request an audit at the next HOA meeting, Marcus said. It's our right as homeowners. We need 10% of households to formally request it. That's 23 signatures. She'll fight it, Mr. Rodriguez warned. Her husband's lawyers will find some technicality. Then we make it public, Tim suggested. Very public, local news public. Marcus's phone buzzed. Another HOA violation notice, this time for excessive oil stains on driveway. He walked outside, looked at his pristine concrete, and took photos. There wasn't a single stain. She's escalating, he told the group, which means we're getting close to something. Over the next week, they quietly gathered signatures. Marcus was careful, only approaching homeowners he knew had issues with Brenda. But paranoia was high. Everyone knew Brenda had eyes everywhere. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marcus was delivering a signature petition to the Wheelers when their teenage son Connor overheard the conversation. Mrs. Wilson. Oh man, she's crazy. You should see what she posts in the private HOA board chat. There's a private chat, Marcus asked. Connor nodded, pulling out his phone. Yeah, my mom's on the board, remember? Check this out. What Connor showed them made everyone in the room gasp. Screenshots of Brenda discussing homeowners in terms that would make any lawyer salivate, references to keeping the neighborhood pure, comments about property values being affected by certain elements, and most damningly, a message from 3 months ago: if we can get Jefferson and the others out, I have buyers lined up willing to pay cash. My commission alone would be worth 6 months of the trouble. Connor, Mrs. Wheeler said slowly, can you send those to Mr. Jefferson? Already done, the teenager said, grinning. But Brenda wasn't sitting idle. The next morning, Marcus woke to find his work van covered in fresh scratches keyed from front to back. His security camera had mysteriously stopped working at 3 a.m. When he went to start the van, he discovered sugar in the gas tank. That's $3,000 in damages easy, his mechanic friend Jorge assessed. You filing a police report? Already did, but without video proof. Hey, Marcus, Jorge interrupted, pointing across the street. Isn't that the Chen's new doorbell camera, the one with the wide-angle lens? Marcus felt a spark of hope. Tim's doorbell camera installed just last week had a perfect view of Marcus's driveway from across the street. The footage was grainy but clear enough. At 3:17 a.m., a figure in a dark hoodie had approached Marcus's van. The figure was careful, keeping their face hidden, but at one point they'd adjusted their hood. The streetlight caught a flash of blonde hair and the distinctive gold bracelet Brenda always wore. We got her, Tim said, watching the footage. This is criminal vandalism. But when Marcus tried to file charges, he hit a wall. The detective assigned to the case, Detective Murray, seemed oddly reluctant. The video's not conclusive, Murray said, not even looking at the screen. Could be anyone with blonde hair. And the gold bracelet. Lots of people have gold bracelets. Marcus left the police station frustrated but not surprised. Deshawn had done some digging. Detective Murray's son worked at Wilson Krensky and Associates. The web of connections ran deep. We need to go bigger, Deshawn advised. File a civil suit. Make enough noise that they can't ignore it. But that would take money Marcus didn't have. The van repairs had eaten into his savings and business at the shop, had mysteriously slowed. Several regular customers had mentioned getting calls warning them about substandard work at Jefferson Automotive. It was Janet Morrison who suggested the next move. What about the local news Channel 7 has that investigative reporter Sarah Kim? She loves stories about HOA abuse. Marcus was hesitant. He'd never wanted to be in the spotlight. But when he came home to find a notice of intent to foreclose from the HOA for unpaid fines totaling $15,000, he knew it was time. The fines were bogus, of course. Brenda had stacked violation upon violation, grass height oil stains that didn't exist, excessive noise from his commercial vehicle, having too many guests. He'd had his grandmother over for Sunday dinner, and dozens of other manufactured infractions. They can't do this, Marcus said to Deshawn over the phone. I've paid every legitimate fine, and I've contested the fake ones. They can if the board votes to enforce, and guess who controls the board? Marcus made the call to Sarah Kim. Sarah arrived the next day in an unmarked car, not wanting to alert Brenda to the investigation. She was younger than Marcus expected, Korean-American with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Jefferson, I've been getting calls about Willowbrook Estates for 2 years, she said, sitting in his living room and reviewing his documentation. You're the first person willing to go on record. What changed? Marcus asked the obvious question. You have evidence. This... She held up the stack of papers, the USB drive with videos and screenshots. This is a pattern of harassment, possible embezzlement, and definite discrimination. This is a story. They filmed for 3 hours. Marcus showed her the vandalized van, the false violations, the deleted Facebook posts. Other neighbors, emboldened by the presence of a news crew, began coming forward. By the end of the day, Sarah had interviews with 12 homeowners. When will this air? Tim asked. I need a week to verify everything, maybe get Brenda's side of the story. But Mr. Jefferson, Sarah turned serious. Once this airs, things might get worse before they get better. Are you prepared for that? Marcus thought about his father, about the shop, about the Camaro sitting covered in his garage, a symbol of everything he'd worked for. I'm prepared. But Brenda had somehow gotten wind of the investigation. The next morning, Marcus found a letter taped to his door, not an HOA violation this time, but something worse. A notice from the city that Jefferson Automotive was under investigation for environmental violations. His business license was suspended pending review. "She's trying to destroy my livelihood," Marcus told Sarah over the phone. "Can you prove it's connected?" The complaint was filed by a concerned citizen named Karen Williams. There is no Karen Williams in the city directory, but guess whose maiden name is Williams? Sarah's investigation intensified. She discovered that BW Holdings, the LLC that had bought Ronald Morse's house, had purchased 6 properties in Willowbrook over the past 3 years, all sold below market value, all by homeowners who'd had conflicts with Brenda. "It's a pattern," Sarah explained to Marcus and the gathered homeowners. "She targets residents, especially minorities, or anyone who challenges her, drowns them in fines and violations, makes their lives miserable until they sell cheap. Then she swoops in as the realtor, double-dipping on the commission." "But the HOA money?" Amy Chen asked. "That's harder to prove without access to the books. We need someone on the inside." That someone turned out to be Gladys Foster, the HOA secretary who'd been silently observing Brenda's behavior for years. She appeared at Marcus's door one evening looking nervous but determined. "I've been keeping copies," she said simply, handing Marcus a box. "Every financial record, every altered minute, every falsified document, 3 years' worth." "Why?" Marcus asked, stunned. "Because my late husband was Japanese-American. His family lost everything during the internment. He taught me to recognize injustice, and he taught me to keep records. Documentation beats conversation, Gladdy," he used to say. Marcus smiled sadly. "My father said the same thing." The records were damning. Over $100,000 had been withdrawn from HOA reserves over 3 years. Payments to vendors that didn't exist. Landscaping companies that had never set foot in Willowbrook. Maintenance work that was never performed. "This is it," Deshawn said, reviewing the documents. "This is federal crime territory. Wire fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, if we can prove the real estate connection." "We need to get this to the FBI," Sarah said. But Brenda struck first. The next morning, police arrested Marcus at his shop for alleged assault. The accusation he'd supposedly threatened Brenda at the last HOA meeting, a meeting he hadn't even attended because he'd been at his grandmother's funeral in Georgia. "I have the death certificate, the plane tickets, the funeral program," Marcus told his court-appointed lawyer. "I wasn't even in the state." "Doesn't matter," the lawyer, an overworked public defender named Tom Brady, no relation, explained. "She has 2 witnesses saying you were there." "Who?" "HOA board members Patricia Hawkins and David Stern." Both were deep in Brenda's pocket, Marcus knew. Patricia's daughter had gotten a full scholarship to State University funded by an anonymous donor right after Patricia joined the board. David's landscaping company had exclusive contracts with the HOA worth $50,000 a year for minimal work. Marcus spent 18 hours in jail before Deshawn and Tim pooled money for bail. He walked out to find news vans in the parking lot. Sarah Kim's story was airing that night. The segment was devastating for Brenda. Sarah had done her homework tracking down former residents, analyzing property records, even getting an interview with Ronald Morse via Skype from his new home in Florida. "She made our lives hell," Ronald said on camera. "When I found those discrepancies and tried to call for an audit, she accused me of embezzling." Me? Then the violations started. My wife was in chemotherapy, and she fined us because our grass was too long. We couldn't fight anymore. We just wanted peace. The story went viral. HOA Karen began trending. The state attorney general's office announced they were opening an investigation. But Brenda doubled down. She called an emergency HOA meeting, attempting to pass new bylaws that would give her broader powers and make it harder to remove board members. Marcus and his coalition showed up in force. The meeting was held in the community center, a building that hadn't seen this many residents since its opening day. Brenda sat at the head table flanked by her board members, and surprisingly, her husband Gerald. Gerald Wilson was everything Marcus had expected: silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of man who wore his privilege like cologne. He whispered constantly in Brenda's ear as residents filed in. "Before we begin," Gerald announced, standing up, "I want to remind everyone that any defamatory statements made in this meeting will be subject to legal action." "Is that a threat?" Marcus asked from his seat in the front row. It's a promise, Mr. Jefferson. My firm doesn't take kindly to baseless accusations against our clients. Your client is your wife, Tim pointed out. Isn't that a conflict of interest? Gerald's smile was shark-like. I'm here as a concerned homeowner, nothing more. Brenda took the microphone. The negative publicity generated by certain residents has damaged our property values. I'm proposing new measures to protect our community's reputation. She outlined the new rules. No speaking to media without board approval. No posting about HOA matters on social media. Fines of up to $5,000 for actions detrimental to community harmony. This is insane. Janet Morrison stood up. You're trying to silence us. I'm trying to protect us, Brenda countered, from troublemakers and agitators who don't understand the value of propriety. Or property values, Mr. Rodriguez asked pointedly. Like the 6 houses your LLC bought for under market value. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Brenda's face went red. How dare you? I dare because it's true. Marcus stood up, holding the records Gladys had provided. Ladies and gentlemen, your HOA president has been stealing from you, embezzling funds, targeting homeowners to force them out, then profiting from their misery. Security, Brenda shouted. Remove him! But there was no security. Instead, the doors opened and FBI agents walked in, led by Special Agent Diana Foster Gladys's daughter. Brenda Wilson, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and violation of the Fair Housing Act. The room erupted. Brenda tried to run but was caught at the door. Gerald threatened everyone with lawsuits until an agent informed him he was also under arrest for conspiracy. As they were led out in handcuffs, Brenda turned to Marcus, her perfect facade finally cracking. You ruined everything. This neighborhood was perfect before you people. That's enough, Agent Foster cut her off. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. The aftermath was swift. The FBI had been building a case for months, it turned out. Sarah Kim's story had simply accelerated their timeline. They found evidence of over $200,000 in embezzled funds. The real estate scheme that had netted Brenda nearly $500,000 in commissions and a pattern of discrimination so clear that the Justice Department filed additional civil rights charges. Patricia Hawkins and David Stern were arrested as accomplices. Patricia's daughter lost her scholarship when it was revealed it had been funded with stolen HOA money. David's landscaping contracts were voided and his company went bankrupt within months. The real surprise came during the investigation of Brenda's finances. She was broke. The big house, the designer clothes, the luxury cars, all funded by stolen money and massive debts. Her husband's law firm had been hemorrhaging clients, and they'd been living on embezzled funds for 2 years. She wasn't just greedy, Agent Foster explained to Marcus during a follow-up interview. She was desperate. The more desperate she got, the more aggressive her tactics became. You were just her latest target, but you were the first to fight back effectively. Marcus nodded, thinking about all the families who'd been driven out before him. What happens to them, the people who lost their homes? There's a restitution fund being set up. They'll get some compensation, though it won't fully make up for what they lost. The trial was a media sensation. Brenda used to controlling every narrative fell apart on the witness stand. She claimed everyone was conspiring against her, that she was protecting property values, that those people were ruining the neighborhood. Which people specifically? The prosecutor asked. Brenda's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. Her prejudice was laid bare for everyone to see. She was convicted on all counts. The judge, an elderly black woman named Hernandez, who'd grown up in segregated housing, didn't mince words during sentencing. Mrs. Wilson, you turned what should be a community into a weapon of discrimination. You abused your position to steal, harass, and destroy lives. You represent the worst kind of corruption, the kind that hides behind respectability and rules. I sentence you to 4 years in federal prison and order restitution of $500,000. Gerald got 2 years and was disbarred. Patricia and David received probation and massive fines. The HOA was dissolved and reformed with new bylaws. Marcus was elected president. He didn't want the job, but the neighbors insisted. You saved this neighborhood. Tim said at the celebration barbecue held in Marcus's backyard. Marcus shook his head, flipping burgers on the grill. We saved it. Together. The Camaro sat in the open garage gleaming in the afternoon sun. Children played in the street. The Patel's house smelled of curry and nobody complained. Mrs. Morrison's kids left their bikes on the lawn and nobody measured them. Mr. Rodriguez's American flag flew proudly and nobody questioned its size. You know what the best part is? Deshawn asked, accepting a beer. What's that? Your dad would be proud. You didn't just fix cars, Marcus. You fixed a whole damn neighborhood. Marcus smiled, looking at the photo of his father he'd hung in the garage. Documentation beats conversation, he said quietly. Every time, Deshawn agreed. Months later, Marcus received a letter from Ronald Morse. He and his wife were moving back to Willowbrook. We heard it's under new management, Ronald wrote, the kind that believes in justice instead of just property values. Marcus personally helped them move back in using his truck and refusing payment. The house they bought, ironically Brenda's former home, sold at auction to pay her restitution needed work, but Marcus knew every contractor in town. The transformation of Willowbrook Estates became a case study in community organizing. Law schools taught courses on the case. The Justice Department used it as an example in Fair Housing Act training. But for Marcus, the real victory was simpler. He could work on his Camaro with the garage door open. He could have his grandmother over for Sunday dinner without counting cars in the driveway. He could exist in his own home without apologizing for it. One evening, as he was polishing the Camaro's chrome, a young couple stopped to admire it. They were new to the neighborhood, looking nervous. Beautiful car, the man said. Is it true what they say about what happened here? Marcus smiled. Depends what you heard. That one man stood up to corruption and saved the whole neighborhood. No, Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag. One neighborhood stood up to corruption. I just happened to have a nice car that started it all. The couple laughed, and Marcus invited them to the next community barbecue. As they walked away hand in hand, Marcus noticed something that made him smile. They were an interracial couple, black woman, white man, walking freely in a neighborhood that Brenda Wilson had tried to keep pure. Hey, Dad, Marcus said to the photo in his garage. We didn't just fix it, we made it better. The Camaro's engine purred to life, and Marcus took it for a drive through the neighborhood, his neighborhood where every wave was friendly, every honk was a greeting, and every house was a home, not a property value. Justice had won. And it drove a cherry-red 1967 Camaro SS with twin racing stripes rebuilt with love by a father and son who believed that documentation beats conversation, but community beats everything. The morning after the community barbecue, Marcus woke to an unusual silence. No HOA notices under his door, no angry neighbors measuring his grass, no police sirens. Just the peaceful sound of birds chirping and the distant laughter of children heading to school. He stretched, feeling muscles relax that had been tense for months, and headed to his kitchen to make coffee. His phone buzzed with a text from Tim Chen. Emergency, check your front yard. Now. Marcus's heart sank. Had Brenda somehow orchestrated something from prison? He rushed to his front door and threw it open, expecting vandalism or worse. Instead, he found his entire front lawn covered in pink plastic flamingos. Hundreds of them. And in the middle, a sign that read, Congrats on your freedom, the grateful neighbors of Willowbrook. You should see your face. Tim laughed, appearing from behind Marcus's truck with his phone out recording. We've been planning this for weeks. You bastard. Marcus chuckled, relief flooding through him. I thought something was actually wrong. After everything we've been through, we figured you needed a good surprise instead of a bad one for once, Janet Morrison called out, emerging from her hiding spot behind the hedge with several other neighbors. As Marcus stood there, surrounded by ridiculous pink birds and laughing neighbors, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was from Washington, D.C. Mr. Jefferson. This is Patricia Delgado from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. I'm calling about your case in Willowbrook Estates. We'd like to discuss having you testify before Congress about HOA discrimination practices. Marcus nearly dropped his coffee mug. Congress as in the United States Congress. Yes, sir. Your case has highlighted a national problem. HOAs govern over 74 million Americans, and discrimination within these organizations often goes unchecked. Your documentation and successful prosecution of Mrs. Wilson has given us a roadmap for federal legislation. We need voices like yours. After Patricia explained the details and Marcus agreed to consider it, he hung up to find his neighbors still standing in his flamingo-covered yard, now looking at him with curiosity. "Everything okay?" Mr. Rodriguez asked. "They want me to testify before Congress," Marcus said, still processing, "about HOA discrimination." The group erupted in cheers and congratulations, but Marcus felt overwhelmed. He was a mechanic, not a public speaker. He fixed transmissions, not legislation. That afternoon at the shop, Marcus tried to focus on a Honda Civic's brake job, but his mind kept wandering. His employee Jorge noticed his distraction when Marcus almost put brake fluid where the oil should go. "Boss, you okay? You've been staring at that brake caliper for 10 minutes. Marcus set down his tools and told Jorge about the call. Jorge whistled low. "That's huge, man. You could help millions of people. Or I could screw it up and make things worse." "When have you ever screwed up something important?" Jorge asked. "You took down Brenda Wilson. You saved this neighborhood. You think your dad would want you to back down now?" Jorge was right, and Marcus knew it. That evening, he called Patricia Delgado back and accepted. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out, giving him time to prepare his testimony. The news of Marcus's upcoming congressional appearance spread through Willowbrook like wildfire. Sarah Kim called wanting to do a follow-up story. The local NAACP chapter offered their support. Even the mayor's office reached out wanting to honor him with a city proclamation. But not everyone was celebrating. Gerald Wilson might have been in federal prison, but his law firm partners weren't. Marcus started receiving legal letters suggesting his testimony could open him to defamation lawsuits. Anonymous calls to his shop increased with voices warning him to remember what happened to people who got too big for their britches. "They're trying to intimidate you," Deshawn said, reviewing the letters in Marcus's living room. "But here's the thing. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Everything you're going to say is documented fact." "It's not the lawsuits I'm worried about," Marcus admitted. "It's the attention. I never wanted to be some kind of symbol." "Too late for that," Tim said, having joined them for moral support. "You became a symbol the moment you stood up to Brenda. The question now is what you do with it." As the hearing date approached, Marcus threw himself into preparation. Patricia Delgado connected him with a team of lawyers from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights who helped him organize his testimony. They spent hours going through his documentation, selecting the most powerful examples, preparing for hostile questions. "Remember," the lead attorney, a sharp woman named Rebecca Torres, advised, "some committee members receive significant donations from real estate groups that profit from HOA management. They might try to paint you as anti-property rights or anti-American dream." "How is wanting to live peacefully in my own home anti-American?" Marcus asked. "It's not, but they'll twist anything they can. Stay calm, stick to facts, and remember your story is powerful because it's true." 3 days before the hearing, Marcus was closing up the shop when he noticed a familiar car in the parking lot. Not Brenda's, she was still in federal prison, but her daughter, Ashley Wilson. She was sitting in her car, clearly working up the courage to approach him. Marcus could have ignored her locked up and driven away. Instead, he walked over and knocked gently on her window. Ashley jumped, then slowly rolled it down. She looked terrible, hollow eyes, unwashed hair, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying shame. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, tears starting to flow. "I'm so sorry for everything my mother did. I had no idea how bad it was until the trial. The things she said about you, about the others. I was away at college. I didn't know." "You didn't know she was stealing?" Marcus asked, not unkindly, but not letting her off easy either. Ashley shook her head. "I knew she was difficult, controlling, but I thought it was just her being her. I didn't know about the money, the targeting, none of it. I believed her when she said she was protecting property values. I'm an idiot." Marcus leaned against her car, considering his words carefully. "You're not responsible for your mother's actions, but now you know the truth. What are you going to do with that knowledge?" "I'm testifying," Ashley said, wiping her eyes, "for the prosecution in the civil cases. I'm going to make sure every family she hurt gets compensation. It won't fix everything, but it's what I can do." Marcus nodded. "That takes courage." Not as much as what you did, Ashley replied. You could have just moved away when she started harassing you. Most people did. But you stayed and fought. I stayed because this is my home, Marcus said simply. Nobody should have to run from their own home. Ashley reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This was in my mom's office. I found it when we were cleaning out the house for auction. I think you should have it. Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph from a Willowbrook community event 5 years ago. In it, Marcus's father was standing next to his Camaro at a car show, smiling broadly. Next to him was a young Ashley Wilson, maybe 17, admiring the car. In the background, barely visible, was Brenda, her face twisted in disapproval. I remember that day, Ashley said. Your dad was so kind. He explained everything about the car, let me sit in it, even though my mom was furious. She grounded me for talking to him, said I was embarrassing the family by associating with those people. I never understood what she meant until now. Marcus studied the photo, seeing his father's joy, his pride in the car they'd built together. Thank you for this. There's something else, Ashley said hesitantly. My mom kept files on everyone, not just HOA stuff, personal things. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on residents she didn't like. Those files are still in our storage unit. The FBI didn't know about them. I thought that maybe the families should have them, so they know what she collected. Marcus felt a chill. How detailed are these files? Credit reports, employment histories, medical information, somehow family problems. She was planning to use them if the HOA violations didn't work. Ashley pulled out a storage unit key. Unit 47 at Secure Store on Maple. The code is 1959, the year she thinks America was perfect. Marcus took the key, its weight feeling heavier than metal should. I'll make sure the right people handle this. As Ashley drove away, Marcus immediately called Agent Foster. Within an hour, FBI agents were at the storage unit discovering what would become crucial evidence in the civil suits proof that Brenda had violated not just civil rights, but numerous privacy laws. The files were staggering. Brenda had documented perceived infractions going back years. Photos taken through windows, recordings of private conversations, background checks on family members. She'd built a surveillance state within Willowbrook, all to maintain her vision of the perfect neighborhood. This is beyond HOA overreach, Agent Foster told Marcus as they reviewed the materials. This is stalking, invasion of privacy, potentially blackmail. We're adding charges. Among the files, they found something that made Marcus's blood run cold: detailed plans to plant drugs in his work van, complete with a contact at a local dealer who owed Gerald Wilson's law firm a favor. The plan had been scheduled for the week after Marcus's arrest, but the FBI raid had happened first. She was going to frame me as a drug dealer, Marcus asked, stunned. It appears so. She had similar plans for the Patels involving immigration fraud, false documentation, ready to submit to ICE. For Mr. Rodriguez, she was going to claim he was selling guns illegally because he had a legitimate collector's license. Marcus sat down hard, the weight of how close they'd all come to disaster hitting him. She wasn't just trying to force us out. She was trying to destroy us. Which is why your testimony is so important, Agent Foster said. This isn't just about one bad HOA president. It's about systemic abuse of power that needs federal oversight. The night before leaving for D.C., Marcus couldn't sleep. He found himself in the garage at 3 a.m. polishing the already perfect Camaro. The repetitive motion was soothing, letting his mind wander. Can't sleep either, a voice said from the garage entrance. It was his grandmother, Eleanor Jefferson, 83 years old and sharp as a tack. She'd driven down from Atlanta when she heard about the congressional hearing. Grandma, what are you doing up? Same thing as you, baby, thinking about the past to make sense of the present. She ran her weathered hand along the Camaro's hood. Your daddy would be so proud, not just of the car, but of you standing up for what's right. I'm scared, Grandma. Marcus admitted something he couldn't say to anyone else. What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing? Eleanor pulled up a folding chair and sat down with the careful movements of age. Let me tell you something about fear. Your grandfather was scared when he sat at that whites-only lunch counter in 1960. Scared when they poured milkshake on his head, when they dragged him out, when they threw him in jail. But he sat anyway. You know why? Marcus shook his head. Because being scared and doing right aren't opposites. They're partners. If you're not scared, it probably ain't important enough. The question isn't whether you're scared, it's whether you let fear drive the car or whether you do. She stood up, kissed his forehead like he was still 10 years old, and headed back inside. Oh, and Marcus, wear your father's watch tomorrow, the one he wore to church. You'll feel him with you. The next morning, Marcus stood in front of his mirror, adjusting the tie Deshawn had helped him pick out. He was wearing his only suit, the one he'd bought for his father's funeral, but Tim's wife Amy had it cleaned and pressed, so it looked almost new. His father's watch, a simple Timex that had kept perfect time for 30 years, sat heavy on his wrist. The drive to the airport was surreal. His neighbors had lined the street holding signs that said, "Willowbrook stands with Marcus," and "Justice for all neighborhoods." Mrs. Patterson was crying, waving a small American flag. The Martinez children had drawn pictures of the Camaro with "Our Hero" written in crayon. No pressure, Jorge joked, driving Marcus to the airport since Marcus was too nervous to drive himself. At the security checkpoint, Marcus was pulled aside for additional screening, random. They said, though, Marcus knew better than to believe that. As the TSA agent went through his bag, he found the folder of documentation Marcus was bringing as backup. "What's all this?" the agent asked. "Evidence of HOA discrimination. I'm testifying before Congress today." The agent, a middle-aged black woman whose badge read T. Washington, looked up sharply. "You're Marcus Jefferson, the one who took down that crazy HOA lady?" Marcus nodded, surprised. "My sister lives in an HOA in Houston. They fined her for having a Black Lives Matter sign in her window, said it was political, while her neighbor's Blue Lives Matter flag was fine. I've been following your case. Give 'em hell, Mr. Jefferson." On the plane, Marcus reviewed his testimony one more time. Rebecca Torres had helped him refine it to exactly 5 minutes, enough time to tell the story, but not so long that committee members would tune out. He'd practiced it dozens of times, but the words still felt foreign in his mouth. The passenger next to him, a white businessman in an expensive suit, noticed what he was reading. "HOA troubles?" the man asked sympathetically. "Something like that," Marcus replied carefully. "I feel you. My HOA tried to fine me for having the wrong shade of beige on my shutters. Can you imagine wrong shade of beige?" The man laughed, clearly expecting Marcus to commiserate about trivial enforcement. Marcus thought about Brenda's files about the plans to plant drugs about families driven from their homes. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I can imagine." Washington, D.C. was overwhelming. The buildings were massive, meant to impress and intimidate. Marcus was met at the airport by Patricia Delgado and a small team from HUD. They briefed him during the ride to the Capitol, going over last-minute details. "The committee chair, Representative Jackson, is sympathetic to our cause," Patricia explained. "But Representative Thornton from Texas is going to push back hard. He receives major donations from the Community Associations Institute." "What's that?" "The lobbying group for HOA management companies. They have a vested interest in keeping federal oversight minimal." They arrived at the Capitol building, and Marcus had to stop for a moment, taking it in. The dome stretched above him, a symbol of democracy that his grandfather had marched to preserve. His father's watch seemed to pulse on his wrist, a steady rhythm that calmed his nerves. The hearing room was smaller than Marcus had expected, but still intimidating. C-SPAN cameras were set up along one wall. The committee members sat elevated above the witness table, their nameplates gleaming. The gallery was packed with observers, including several familiar faces from Willowbrook who'd flown in to support him. "Mr. Jefferson." Representative Jackson began after Marcus was sworn in. "Thank you for being here today. Please tell us your story." Marcus looked up at the committee, then back at his notes. Then he pushed the papers aside and spoke from his heart. "My name is Marcus Jefferson. I'm a mechanic from Willowbrook Estates, and I'm here because my HOA president tried to destroy my life for the crime of existing while black in my own home." The room went silent. Even Representative Thornton stopped shuffling his papers. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "Brenda Wilson didn't just measure my grass or count my guests. She weaponized an entire system designed to protect property values and used it to terrorize families who didn't fit her vision of what America should look like. She stole money, yes, Over $200,000. But more than that, she stole peace of mind. She stole the American dream from families who'd worked their whole lives to achieve it. He told them about the false police reports, the vandalism, the surveillance. He showed them photos of the damaged van, the fabricated violations, the plans to plant evidence. He read from Brenda's own words in the HOA board chat, her casual racism laid bare. But here's what I want you to understand, Marcus said, looking directly at Representative Thornton. Brenda Wilson isn't unique. She's just the one who got caught. There are thousands of HOAs across this country operating without oversight, without accountability, with the power to fine lien and foreclose on homes for violations as minor as the wrong color mailbox. And when that power combines with prejudice, it becomes a weapon. Representative Thornton leaned into his microphone. Mr. Jefferson, while your individual case is certainly troubling, aren't you asking us to regulate private organizations? HOAs are voluntary. People choose to live in them. Marcus had prepared for this. Representative, with respect, over 30% of American homes are in HOAs. In many areas, especially for families seeking good schools and safe neighborhoods, there is no choice. Every new development has an HOA. And once you're in, you can't opt out without selling your home. That's not voluntary, that's coercion. But surely, Thornton pressed, most HOAs operate fairly. We can't legislate based on outliers. Is discrimination an outlier? Marcus asked. Because I have here, he lifted a thick folder, documentation of 247 similar cases from the last year alone. Families fined for ethnic food smells. Children's chalk drawings deemed vandalism in minority households, but art in white ones. Selective enforcement that consistently targets people of color, religious minorities, the elderly, and the disabled. Representative Martinez from California spoke up. Mr. Jefferson, what specific remedies are you proposing? Marcus was ready for this too. First, federal oversight of HOA financial records to prevent embezzlement. Second, civil rights protections that explicitly cover HOA actions. Third, mandatory training for HOA boards on fair housing laws. Fourth, a federal database of HOA violations and complaints. So patterns like what happened in Willowbrook can be identified before families lose their homes. That sounds expensive, Thornton interjected. More expensive than the lawsuits HOAs already generate, Marcus responded. More expensive than families losing their homes to fraudulent liens. More expensive than the mental health crisis created by harassment and discrimination. The Willowbrook cases alone have cost taxpayers over $2 million in court proceedings and FBI investigations. Prevention is always cheaper than prosecution. Representative Kim from New York herself, a former HOA resident, leaned forward. Mr. Jefferson, tell us about the impact on your community. Not the financial impact, but the human one. Marcus thought of his neighbors, of the fear that had gripped Willowbrook for years. We had a retiree, Mr. Morse, whose wife was going through chemotherapy. Instead of supporting them, Brenda fined them repeatedly for grass height when they were too exhausted from hospital visits to maintain their yard. They sold their home for $60,000 undervalue just to escape. Mrs. Patel stopped cooking her family's traditional foods because she was fined for offensive odors. Children stopped playing outside because their noise might generate violations. We weren't living in a community, we were living in a prison where the warden had complete control over our daily lives. The gallery murmured with recognition. Marcus saw several people nodding their own experiences reflected in his words. Representative Jackson asked, "What's happened to Willowbrook since Mrs. Wilson's arrest?" Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the room. "We've become an actual community. Neighbors help each other with yard work. We have block parties without fearing fines. Children play freely. We've raised money for the families who were forced out, helping some of them return. We discovered that when fear is removed, people naturally want to maintain their homes and support their neighbors. We didn't need a dictator, we needed democracy." The hearing continued for another hour, with Marcus answering increasingly specific questions about documentation, legal precedents, and proposed legislation. Rebecca Torres had prepared him well, and he had an answer for everything. Finally, Representative Jackson asked the last question. "Mr. Jefferson, you've been through a traumatic experience. You could have simply moved on with your life after winning your case. Why are you here? Marcus touched his father's watch, feeling its steady tick. My father taught me that when you fix something, you don't just patch the immediate problem, you address the underlying issue to prevent future failures. Brenda Wilson was a symptom of a broken system. If we don't fix the system, there will be more Brendas, more Willowbrooks, more families destroyed by unchecked power. I'm here because my father also taught me that documentation beats conversation, but action beats everything. This is my action. The room erupted in applause from the gallery, quickly gavelled down by Representative Jackson. As Marcus stood to leave, Representative Thornton called out one more question. Mr. Jefferson, do you really think federal legislation will solve this problem? Marcus turned back. No, Representative. Legislation alone won't solve it, but it's a start. The real solution is people standing up, speaking out, and refusing to accept discrimination in any form. The law just gives them the tools to do it. As he walked out of the hearing room, Marcus was surrounded by supporters, reporters, and other HOA victims wanting to share their stories. Sarah Kim was there with her camera crew representatives from civil rights organizations, handed him business cards, and Patricia Delgado was already fielding calls from other congressional offices interested in sponsoring legislation. But what meant the most to Marcus was the text from Tim Chen. Watched it all on C-SPAN. The whole neighborhood is at your house for a watching party. Mrs. Patterson made her famous potato salad. Hurry home. On the flight back, Marcus finally allowed himself to relax. The businessman from his earlier flight was somehow on this one too, and recognized him. Hey, you're that guy I saw you on the news at the airport. You really gave it to them in that hearing. Just told the truth, Marcus replied. Well, you've inspired me. Our HOA has been harassing my Indian neighbors about their Diwali decorations while letting Christmas displays stay up year-round. I'm going to say something at the next meeting. Marcus smiled. Document everything. And remember, you're not alone. None of us are. Back in Willowbrook, the entire neighborhood had indeed gathered at his house. The garage door was open, the Camaro gleaming in the driveway, and someone had set up a projector showing news coverage of the hearing. When Marcus arrived, the cheers could be heard 3 blocks away. Speech, speech, people chanted. Marcus stood on his porch, looking at the faces of his neighbors, Black, white, Asian, Latino, all united by their shared experience and victory. I went to Washington thinking I was speaking for Willowbrook, he said. But I realized I was speaking for every neighborhood where people just want to live in peace. We didn't just win a court case, we started a movement. And it doesn't end here. Mr. Rodriguez raised his beer. To Marcus and to the Camaro that started it all. Everyone laughed and toasted, but Marcus noticed someone standing at the edge of the crowd, Ashley Wilson, looking uncertain. He waved her over. I don't know if I should be here, she said quietly. You testified for the civil suits. You gave us the storage unit evidence. You're part of this victory too, Marcus told her. Janet Morrison overheard and added, Honey, you're not responsible for your mother's sins. You're welcome here. As the party continued into the evening, Marcus found himself back in the garage running his hand over the Camaro's hood. Deshawn joined him. So what's next? Deshawn asked. You're famous now. Book deals, speaking tours, maybe a movie. Marcus shook his head. Monday morning, I'll be back at the shop fixing cars. That's who I am. But if someone needs help with their HOA, if someone needs to know they're not alone in fighting discrimination, I'll be there. Your dad would be proud. I hope so. Marcus looked at the photo from the car show that Ashley had given him, now framed and hanging in the garage. His father's smile seemed to glow in the evening light. 3 weeks later, the first version of the Fair Housing in HOAs Act was introduced in Congress. It included every provision Marcus had suggested and some he hadn't thought of. While it would face months of debate and revision, its introduction alone sent shockwaves through the HOA management industry. Brenda Wilson, watching the news from her federal prison cell, saw Marcus's testimony replayed again and again. Her cellmate in for wire fraud asked her, "Is that the guy who put you in here?" Brenda didn't answer, but her silence said everything. Back in Willowbrook, life continued with a new rhythm. The reformed HOA board met monthly in Marcus's garage. He'd insisted on it, saying transparency meant being visible to everyone. They dealt with real issues, organizing community cleanups, planning social events, coordinating help for elderly residents. The petty tyranny was gone. replaced by genuine governance. One evening, as Marcus was teaching a group of neighborhood kids basic car maintenance, a program he'd started to keep them engaged and off the streets, one of them asked, "Mr. J, were you scared when you stood up to that mean lady?" Marcus thought about his grandmother's words. Every single day, but sometimes the right thing to do is the scary thing to do. "Like Batman?" the kid asked excitedly. Marcus laughed. "Sure, if Batman drove a Camaro and carried a wrench instead of a batarang." As the kids giggled and returned to learning about oil changes, Marcus realized something. The fight against Brenda Wilson hadn't just saved his home, it had transformed it. Willowbrook wasn't just a collection of houses anymore. It was a community forged in struggle and strengthened by justice. The weeks following Marcus's congressional testimony brought changes he never anticipated. His shop, Jefferson Automotive, was busier than ever, but not just with cars. Reporters showed up, daily civil rights organizations wanted him to speak at events, and HOA victims from across the country sent him their stories seeking advice. Marcus had installed a separate phone line just to handle the calls, though. He still insisted on personally working on every car that came through his garage doors. It was a Thursday morning when everything shifted again. Marcus was underneath a 2003 Honda Accord oil draining into a pan when Jorge called out, "Boss, you got visitors. They say it's urgent." Marcus rolled out from under the car to find two FBI agents he didn't recognize, their expressions grim. The taller one, Agent Chen, held a tablet showing what looked like financial records. "Mr. Jefferson, we need to talk about Brenda Wilson. She's been busy in prison."
Was she?
Marcus wiped his hands on a rag dread pooling in his stomach. "What do you mean, busy?" "She's been coordinating with people on the outside. We intercepted communications suggesting she's hidden assets we haven't found yet, and she's using them to fund something. We need your help." They moved to Marcus's small office in the back of the shop, where Agent Chen's partner, Agent Davis, spread out documents on the cluttered desk. "These are visitor logs from the federal facility where Wilson is being held. Notice anything?" Marcus studied the names. Most were lawyers, which was expected, but one name appeared weakly: Catherine Brennan. "I don't recognize her." "She's a paralegal at a firm in Charlotte. On paper, she's assisting with Wilson's appeals, but we've traced payments from offshore accounts to her personal accounts, amounts that no paralegal work would justify." "You think Brenda has hidden money?" "We know she does. The question is how much and where." But that's not the worst part. Agent Davis pulled up a photo on his tablet. It showed a mansion in another suburban development about 40 miles from Willowbrook. "This is Riverside Estates. 3 weeks ago, they elected a new HOA president. Want to guess who?" Marcus stared at the screen. "Catherine Brennan. She's implementing the exact same playbook, targeting minority families, excessive fines, suspicious financial transactions. We think Brenda is running her from prison, using Brennan as a proxy to continue her operation." Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. "How is that even possible? She's in federal prison." "Prison doesn't cut you off from the world completely," Agent Chen explained. "Phone calls, letters, visitor meetings. If you're smart about it and have help on the outside, you can coordinate quite a bit. We need someone who understands Brenda's methods to help us decode what she's planning." Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. It was Tim Chen, and he sounded panicked. "Marcus, you need to get back to Willowbrook. Now. Something's happened to Mr. Rodriguez." Marcus found Mr. Rodriguez's house surrounded by ambulances and police cars. The elderly veteran was being loaded onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask over his face. His daughter Maria was crying, trying to explain to the paramedics what had happened. "He got a letter," she told Marcus when she saw him. "Something about his house being sold for unpaid debts. He started having chest pains, couldn't breathe." "What letter? What debts?" Maria handed him an official-looking document. It claimed that Mr. Rodriguez owed $75,000 in back HOA fees and fines from Brenda's presidency debts that had somehow never appeared during the criminal trial. The letter stated that a lien had been placed on his house and it would be sold at auction in 30 days if the debt wasn't paid. "This is impossible," Marcus said, studying the document. "All of Brenda's fines were voided by the court." Tim Chen had arrived and was reading over Marcus's shoulder. "Look at the law firm handling this. Brennan Kowalski and Associates. Why does that name sound familiar?" Agent Chen, who had followed Marcus from the shop, answered grimly. Catherine Brennan's husband is Thomas Kowalski. They're working together. The pieces were falling into place. Brenda hadn't given up. From her prison cell, she was orchestrating a new campaign of terror, using proxies to continue her war against the families she blamed for her downfall. That evening, an emergency meeting was called at the community center. The room was packed, fear palpable in the air. Several other families had received similar letters, all claiming massive debts from the Brenda era, all threatening foreclosure. How can they do this? Janet Morrison demanded. The court threw out all those fines. Deshawn, who had been reviewing the legal documents, looked troubled. They're claiming these aren't the fines from the criminal case. They're saying these are previously undocumented fees that were discovered during a recent audit. An audit that nobody authorized, Amy Chen added. She'd been going through the HOA's current records. There's no board vote for any audit. This is completely fabricated. Marcus stood up, his voice cutting through the growing panic. This is Brenda. She's trying to destroy us from prison, but we beat her once and we'll beat her again. Deshawn, can you file for an emergency injunction? Already drafting it, Deshawn replied. But we need to prove these documents are fraudulent. That means getting access to the original HOA records, which are supposed to be in storage. I'll handle that, Agent Chen said. This is now part of our federal investigation. As the meeting broke up, Marcus noticed Ashley Wilson sitting in the back corner, having slipped in late. She looked terrified. Marcus approached her carefully. Ashley, what's wrong? She handed him her phone with shaking hands. On the screen was a text message. You betrayed your mother. You betrayed your family. Time to pay. KB. Catherine Brennan is threatening me, Ashley whispered. She says if I don't recant my testimony, she'll release information about my father's clients, things that could destroy what's left of his firm. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him anymore. Brenda's reach was extending from prison, touching everyone who had stood against her. The next morning, Marcus arrived at his shop to find it vandalized. Snitch was spray-painted across the garage doors. His tools were scattered across the parking lot, some broken, others missing. The Camaro, thankfully locked in the garage, was untouched, but the message was clear. Jorge arrived shortly after, surveying the damage with disgust. This is escalating, boss. Maybe you should lay low for a while. That's what they want, Marcus replied, already starting to clean up. They want us scared, separated, weak. But we're none of those things. As they cleaned, Sarah Kim arrived with her news crew. She'd been following the story since the beginning, and her coverage had gone national. Marcus, this needs to be documented. The public needs to know that Brenda Wilson is still orchestrating harassment from prison. Marcus hesitated. More publicity meant more attention, potentially more danger, but it also meant protection through visibility. All right, but we do this right. I want to show not just what they're doing to us, but how we're fighting back. The interview was powerful. Marcus stood in front of his vandalized shop, tools still scattered behind him, and spoke directly to the camera. Brenda Wilson thinks she can break us from a prison cell. She thinks we'll scatter like we did before. But she's wrong. We're not just neighbors anymore. We're family, and families protect each other. Within hours, the segment went viral. The hashtag #Willowbrook. Strong started trending. Offers of help poured in from across the country. A GoFundMe to help with legal fees raised $50,000 in its first day. But Catherine Brennan wasn't backing down. That afternoon, she held her own press conference at Riverside Estates, flanked by Thomas Kowalski and several other lawyers. The residents of Willowbrook are attempting to avoid legitimate debts, she declared to the cameras. We have documentation proving these obligations predate any criminal activity. We're simply trying to collect what's legally owed. She produced boxes of what she claimed were original HOA records, date-stamped from before Brenda's arrest. These families want a free pass because they played victim, but debts don't disappear because you don't like who you owe them to. Watching the press conference from his shop, Marcus noticed something. In one of the boxes Brennan was showing, he caught a glimpse of a folder edge. It had a small sticker barely visible, but Marcus recognized it. It was the same coding system Brenda had used in the storage unit files, the ones Ashley had revealed. Jorge, Marcus called out. Remember when we cleaned out Brenda's storage unit for the FBI? Yeah, creepy place. Why, Bao? Did we get everything? Jorge thought for a moment. We got everything from Unit 47, but now that you mention it, the facility manager said something about her having multiple units. We only had the key for one. Marcus immediately called Agent Chen. Brenda has more storage units. That's where these fake documents are coming from. Catherine Brennan must have the keys. The FBI moved fast. Within hours, they had warrants for every storage facility within 50 miles. What they found was staggering. Brenda had rented 7 different units under various names, each filled with fabricated documents, backdated records, and what appeared to be a complete shadow bookkeeping system for the HOA going back years. She was planning this for a long time, Agent Davis told Marcus as they walked through one of the units. This isn't just reaction to being caught. This was her insurance policy. Among the documents, they found something even more disturbing, detailed plans for what Brenda called the restoration. It outlined a systematic approach to forcing out every family that had opposed her using a network of HOAs across the state. Catherine Brennan wasn't working alone. There were others all coordinating to implement Brenda's vision of homogeneous neighborhoods. It's like a supremacist network, but for suburbs, Agent Chen said, reading through the plans. They call themselves the Homeowners Heritage Foundation. Marcus felt sick. This was bigger than Willowbrook, bigger than just one racist HOA president. This was organized, systematic discrimination hiding behind the veneer of property values and community standards. That night, Marcus called a meeting with his inner circle, Tim Deshawn, Amy Janet, and surprisingly Ashley Wilson, who had proven herself a valuable ally. "We need to go on offense," Marcus said. "Playing defense just lets them control the narrative." "What do you have in mind?" Tim asked. "We expose the whole network, every HOA president involved, every lawyer, every fake document. We make it so public, so undeniable, that the authorities have to act." Ashley spoke up. "I might be able to help. My mother had contacts she thought were friends. They might talk to me thinking I'm on their side." "That's dangerous," Janet warned. "If they figure out you're gathering information—" "They already threaten me," Ashley replied. "I'm in danger either way. At least this way I'm doing something useful." Over the next week, they executed their plan like a military operation. Ashley attended a Homeowners Heritage Foundation meeting wearing a wire provided by the FBI. The conversations she recorded were damning. HOA presidents from 12 different communities discussing strategies to maintain neighborhood integrity through targeted harassment. Amy Chen used her forensic accounting skills to trace money flows between the various HOAs and the law firms representing them. She found a pattern of kickbacks, embezzled funds being funneled through legal fees and then redistributed to fund more harassment campaigns. Tim and his tech-savvy son, Connor, created a website documenting everything they'd found. They posted recordings, financial documents, and testimonies from affected families. They called it the HOA Files, and it spread across social media like wildfire. But the most powerful moment came from an unexpected source. Marcus was at the shop working late to catch up on delayed repairs when an elderly white woman walked in. She was elegantly dressed, carried herself with obvious wealth, and looked deeply uncomfortable. "Mr. Jefferson, my name is Margaret Thornton. Brenda Wilson is my daughter." Marcus nearly dropped his wrench. He'd known Brenda had family, but they'd been completely absent during the trial and its aftermath. Margaret continued, tears forming in her eyes. "I've been watching the news, reading about what she did, what she's still doing. I raised her better than this, or at least I thought I did. Mrs. Thornton, why are you here?" She pulled out an envelope from her purse. "Because somewhere along the way I failed as a mother. Brenda learned this hatred, this entitlement, and I was too blind or too comfortable to see it growing. I can't undo that, but maybe I can help stop it." Inside the envelope were letters Brenda had written to her mother from prison. They revealed not just the extent of the Homeowners Heritage Foundation network, but its funding sources, including several prominent real estate developers who saw discriminatory HOAs as a way to maintain property values in their developments. "She was always Father's favorite," Margaret said sadly. "He filled her head with ideas about the right kind of people and protecting what's ours. I stayed silent because it was easier than fighting. This is my fault, too." Marcus didn't know what to say. The pain in the woman's eyes was genuine, the weight of generational prejudice made manifest. "What do you want me to do with these?" he asked. "Whatever it takes to stop her, to stop all of them. I'll testify if needed. It's time someone in our family stood for what's right instead of what's white." The revelation of Margaret Thornton's cooperation sent shockwaves through the Homeowners Heritage Foundation. Catherine Brennan held an emergency press conference trying to discredit Margaret as a senile old woman being manipulated. But Margaret responded with her own press conference held in Marcus's garage with the Camaro as a backdrop. "I'm 78 years old," Margaret said to the assembled reporters. "I've lived through segregation integration, and now this new segregation dressed up as property values. I've been silent too long. My daughter is in prison because she took the hatred she learned and weaponized it. If other parents don't speak up, their children will follow the same path." The image of a wealthy white grandmother standing with Marcus and his multiracial coalition of neighbors became iconic. It stripped away the foundation's ability to claim this was about anything other than race. The FBI raids came on a Tuesday morning. 12 HOA presidents, 6 lawyers, and 3 real estate developers were arrested in coordinated raids across 4 states. Catherine Brennan was taken from her home in handcuffs, screaming about property rights as she was led away. In her prison cell, Brenda Wilson watched the news coverage with increasing rage. Her network was crumbling, her mother had betrayed her, and Marcus Jefferson was being hailed as a hero. She began composing another letter, this one to a contact she'd held in reserve, someone even the FBI didn't know about. But that letter would never be sent. The next morning, guards found Brenda in the infirmary having suffered what appeared to be a stroke. She would survive, but with significant impairment to her speech and motor functions. The woman who had terrorized a neighborhood with her words and schemes was reduced to struggling to form basic sentences. Some might have seen it as poetic justice. Marcus saw it as simply sad. All that hate, all that energy spent on trying to control others, and where had it led? To a prison hospital bed abandoned by everyone except the mother she'd ultimately disappointed. Back in Willowbrook, the community was healing. Mr. Rodriguez had recovered from his heart episode and was teaching neighborhood kids about his military service. The fraudulent liens had been dismissed, and several families who'd been forced out were returning, aided by a fund established with the seized assets from the Homeowners Heritage Foundation. Marcus stood in his garage one evening, finally having time to work on the Camaro without interruption. He was installing new brake pads, a simple job he could do in his sleep, but one that brought him peace. Jorge had gone home, the shop was quiet, and for the first time in months, Marcus felt like he could breathe. Tim Chen appeared in the doorway holding 2 beers. "Thought you could use one of these." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. Children were playing in the street, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The Patels were having a barbecue, the smell of tandoori chicken mixing with typical American cookout fare. Mr. Rodriguez's flag flew proudly, and nobody measured its dimensions. "You know what the best part is?" Tim finally said. "What's that?" "My kids aren't going to grow up afraid in their own neighborhood. That's because of you." Marcus shook his head. "That's because of all of us. I just had a nice car that pissed off the wrong person." They laughed, but both knew it was more than that. Marcus had become a symbol whether he'd wanted to or not. The mechanic who fixed more than just cars, the man who stood up when everyone else was too afraid. Sarah Kim's final documentary about the Willowbrook case won an Emmy. She interviewed Marcus in his garage, the Camaro gleaming in the background, and asked him what he'd learned from everything that had happened. "I learned that hate is lazy," Marcus said, wiping his hands on a rag. "It's easier to fear someone different than to get to know them. It's easier to blame others for your problems than to face them yourself." Brenda Wilson was lazy. She took the easy path of hate instead of the hard work of community. "And what about love?" Sarah asked. Marcus smiled, thinking of his father, his grandmother, his neighbors who'd become family. "Love is work. It's checking on your elderly neighbor. It's teaching kids to change oil. It's standing up for someone even when you're scared. Love is refusing to let hate win, even when hate has all the power and paperwork on its side." The documentary ended with a shot of Willowbrook's annual block party held in Marcus's honor, but dedicated to the community. The Camaro was parked in the center hood open, with kids learning about engines while their parents shared food from a dozen different cultures. It was America as it should be, not perfect, but trying, not uniform, but united. Ashley Wilson attended the party, having legally changed her last name to Morse in honor of Ronald Morse, the former treasurer who'd first tried to expose her mother. She was studying law now, planning to specialize in civil rights and housing discrimination. Marcus had written her a recommendation letter for law school, focusing on her courage in standing against her own family for what was right. "You know she writes to me," Ashley told Marcus as they watched the celebration. "My mother. Even with her impairment, she manages to write these angry, barely legible letters. What do you do with them?" "I keep them as a reminder of what I came from and what I chose to become instead." Marcus understood. We all carry our histories, but we don't have to be imprisoned by them. Brenda had chosen to let her prejudices define her. Ashley had chosen differently. As the party wound down, Marcus found himself back in the garage with the core group that had fought alongside him. Deshaun, Tim, Amy Janet, Mr. Rodriguez, and now Ashley. They'd been through war together, and like all veterans, they shared a bond that couldn't be broken. "So what's next?" Deshaun asked. "You've testified before Congress, taken down a racist network, became a civil rights icon. Hard to top that." Marcus laughed. "Tomorrow I've got 3 oil changes, a transmission rebuild, and Mrs. Patterson's Buick needs new shocks. That's what's next." "You're really going to just go back to being a mechanic?" Janet asked. "I never stopped being a mechanic," Marcus replied. "I just had to fix something bigger than a car for a while." But they all knew it wasn't really over. The Fair Housing and HOAs Act was making its way through Congress. Marcus would likely be called to testify again. Other communities facing similar discrimination were reaching out for guidance. The work continued, even if the immediate crisis had passed. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, Marcus sat in his garage alone. He'd finally replaced the security camera Brenda had somehow disabled all those months ago. The new one had a clear view of the entire driveway and the street beyond, but more importantly, it showed a neighborhood at peace. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to an old voicemail he'd saved. It was his father calling from the hospital just days before he died. "Hey son, just wanted to hear your voice. I'm proud of you, you know that. Not just for the shop or the car, but for the man you've become. You stand for something. In this world, that's everything. Love you, son." Marcus had listened to that message 100 times during the darkest moments of the fight against Brenda. It had kept him going when the vandalism, the false arrests, and the threats had made him want to give up. He looked at the photo of his father hanging in the garage, the one from the car show where Ashley had met him. His father was smiling proud, standing next to the car they'd built together. But now Marcus saw something else in that photo. His father wasn't just proud of the car. He was proud of being there in that neighborhood at that moment, refusing to be invisible or unwelcome. "We did it, Dad," Marcus said quietly. "We fixed it." Outside, a light rain began to fall, washing the streets clean. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, Marcus knew. There would always be Brendas in the world, people who confused prejudice with principle, who mistook uniformity for unity. But there would also always be people willing to stand against them, communities willing to come together, and mechanics willing to fix what was broken. Marcus covered the Camaro, carefully turned off the garage lights, and headed inside. His phone buzzed with a text from a HOA president in Phoenix who'd seen the documentary and wanted advice on dealing with discrimination in her community. Marcus smiled and typed back, "Document everything, stand together, and remember, love is work, but it's worth it." As he climbed into bed, Marcus could hear the neighborhood settling into sleep around him. No sirens, no angry voices, no fear, just the quiet of a community at peace with itself. It had cost him months of struggle, thousands in legal fees, and more stress than he'd ever wanted to experience. But as he drifted off to sleep, Marcus knew the truth. Some things are worth fighting for, and home, real home, was definitely one of them. The Camaro sat in his garage, a silent sentinel, its chrome reflecting the streetlights that kept the darkness at bay. It had started as a restoration project between a father and son, become a symbol of injustice, and ended as a beacon of hope. But at its heart, it was still just a car waiting for the next Sunday drive, the next car show, the next chance to remind everyone that beauty comes in many forms, and all of them deserve to park in their own driveways without fear. The call came at 2:47 a.m., jarring Marcus from a deep sleep. He fumbled for his phone, expecting another emergency, another crisis stemming from the HOA battle. But the voice on the other end wasn't panicked. It was professional, controlled, and unfamiliar. Mr. Jefferson, this is Director Patricia Lawson from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. I apologize for the hour, but we have a situation that requires your immediate expertise. Marcus sat up instantly alert. What kind of situation? There's been an incident in Riverside Estates. Catherine Brennan made bail yesterday. Within 12 hours, 3 families received eviction notices, and there was a fire at the home of one of the witnesses set to testify against her. We need you here. Marcus was already getting dressed. Riverside Estates is 40 miles away. Why do you need me? Because the families trust you, Mr. Jefferson. They've specifically requested your presence. And frankly, you understand Brenda Wilson's playbook better than anyone. We believe Brennan is escalating, possibly destroying evidence. Can you come by? By 3:30 a.m., Marcus was on the highway, the Camaro's engine purring through the empty streets. He'd thought about taking his truck, but something told him the Camaro mattered here. It was a symbol now, whether he liked it or not. As he drove, he called Tim Chen. They let Brennan out on bail. Tim said, disbelief clear even through the phone's speaker. After everything they found, her husband's firm posted $2 million. Money talks even when it's dirty money. You need backup. Marcus considered it. Not yet. Let me assess the situation first, but keep everyone on alert. If Brennan's escalating, she might come after Willowbrook next. Riverside Estates looked like Willowbrook's wealthier cousin. Larger houses, perfectly manicured lawns, even in the pre-dawn darkness, and an entrance gate that screamed exclusivity. But as Marcus drove through, guided by Director Lawson's coordinates, he saw the signs of fear lights on in houses that should be dark cars packed as if for quick escape, and security cameras that had been recently installed, their mounts still raw against the brick. The fire scene was still active when Marcus arrived. The house, a modest 2-story colonial, was charred on one side, smoke still wisping from the destroyed garage. Fire investigators worked under floodlights while a family stood in their neighbor's driveway, still in their pajamas, the mother holding 2 young children close. Director Lawson met Marcus as he parked. She was younger than her voice had suggested, maybe 40, with the kind of intense focus that came from seeing too much injustice. Mr. Jefferson, thank you for coming. The Nguyen family. She gestured to the family in pajamas, received an eviction notice at 6 p.m. yesterday. At midnight, their garage caught fire. The investigators' preliminary assessment is arson accelerant was used. Where's Brennan? At home with an alibi. Her husband claims they were hosting a dinner party until 2 a.m. 6 witnesses, all members of their firm. Marcus approached the Nguyen family carefully. The father, a man about his age, looked up with hollow eyes. You're Marcus Jefferson. We saw your testimony. We thought once Brennan was arrested, we'd be safe. I'm sorry this happened to you, Marcus said. Tell me about the eviction notice. Mrs. Nguyen spoke up, her voice shaking with anger more than fear. It claims we've been running an illegal business from our home. My mother babysits our children and 2 others from the neighborhood. They're calling it an unlicensed daycare. Marcus recognized the tactic immediately. It was pure Brenda Wilson, find something innocent, twist it into a violation, then use it as a weapon. Do you have the notice? Mr. Nguyen handed over the paperwork. Marcus studied it under the floodlights, noting the language, the citations, the signature. It was more sophisticated than Brenda's work legally speaking, but the intent was the same. This won't hold up in court, Marcus told them. But that's not really the point, is it? They want you scared enough to leave voluntarily. It's working, Mrs. Nguyen admitted. We have children. If they're willing to burn our house. A commotion from down the street interrupted them. 2 more families were emerging from their homes, eviction notices in hand, having just discovered them taped to their doors. Director Lawson's phone rang constantly as reports came in from around the development. 7 families so far, she told Marcus after a particularly intense call. All minorities, all received notices within the last 6 hours. The grounds range from grass height to noise violations to suspected illegal subletting. Marcus felt the familiar anger building, but also something else, a clarity that came from experience. She's not just escalating, she's desperate. This is too much too fast. She's making mistakes. What do you mean? Brenda was methodical, careful. She built cases over months, created paper trails that looked legitimate. This, Marcus gestured at the chaos around them. This is panic. Something's pressuring Brennan to move quickly. As dawn broke over Riverside Estates, Marcus convened an impromptu meeting in the Nguyen's neighbor's backyard. 15 families gathered, all clutching eviction notices or violation warnings. The fear was palpable, but so was the anger. "They want us gone," said James Patterson, an elderly black man who'd lived in Riverside for 20 years. "My wife is in a wheelchair. We modified our front steps for her ramp, and now they're saying it's an unauthorized structural change." "My son has autism," added Maria Santos. "He sometimes makes noise at night. They're calling it a persistent disturbance and threatening to fine us $500 per incident." Marcus listened to each story, taking notes, recognizing the pattern. But something was off. He pulled Director Lawson aside. "These aren't just HOA violations. Some of these reference city codes, state regulations, even federal statutes. This is beyond what an HOA president should have access to or knowledge of." Lawson's eyes narrowed. "You think someone's helping her? Someone with broader authority?" Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang. It was Ashley Wilson, and she was crying. "Marcus, they took my mom. Men came to the prison infirmary and transferred her. They said it was for specialized treatment, but the guards didn't recognize them. They had paperwork, but something felt wrong." Marcus put her on speaker so Lawson could hear. "Ashley, did you get any names, badge numbers?" One guard took a photo of their van's license plate. "I'm sending it now." The image came through moments later. Lawson immediately called it into her team. Within minutes, they had an answer that changed everything. "The van is registered to a private medical transport company," Lawson reported. "But here's the interesting part. It's owned by a shell company that traces back to Thomas Kowalski's firm." "They broke Brenda out," Marcus said, incredulous. "Not officially. On paper, she's being transferred for specialized stroke treatment, but the facility they're supposedly taking her to, it doesn't exist." The pieces were falling into place. Catherine Brennan's desperate moves, the sophisticated legal attacks, the suspicious timing. Brenda Wilson was free and orchestrating everything. "We need to find her," Lawson said, already on her phone coordinating with the FBI and U.S. Marshals. "If she's out and directing this—" "She won't run," Marcus interrupted. "Not Brenda. She'll want to watch her victory. She'll be close." Marcus thought about what he knew of Brenda, her psychology, her need for control. Then it hit him. The HOA office. Does Riverside Estates have a central HOA office? "In the community center," one of the gathered residents confirmed. "But it's been closed since Brennan's arrest." Marcus looked at Lawson. "That's where she is. Or at least that's where her command center is." Lawson wanted to wait for backup, but Marcus knew they were running out of time. Every minute meant more families terrorized, more evidence destroyed. He convinced her to let him approach first alone while law enforcement staged nearby. The Riverside Estates Community Center was a beautiful building, all brick and white columns, the kind of place that hosted wedding receptions and charity galas. But as Marcus approached, he noticed the subtle signs of recent activity. Fresh tire tracks in the morning dew, a window blind that wasn't quite straight, the security camera that had been spray-painted black. He parked the Camaro directly in front, making no attempt at stealth. If Brenda was watching, and he knew she would be, he wanted her to see him coming. He wanted her to know that the man she'd tried to destroy was here to finish this. The front door was locked, but Marcus had learned a few things during the investigation. He walked around to the service entrance, the one the cleaning crew used. It was propped open with a small rock, an old smoker's trick. Someone had been coming and going, someone who didn't have official keys. Inside the community center was dark, lit only by emergency exit signs and the morning sun filtering through high windows. Marcus moved carefully through the main hall, past the empty reception desk toward the administrative offices in the back. He heard voices before he saw them. One was definitely Catherine Brennan, high-pitched and stressed. The other was familiar but wrong, somehow slurred and difficult. "We need more time," Brennan was saying. "The fires will keep them scared, but the authorities—" "No more time," the other voice interrupted, and Marcus realized with a chill that it was Brenda Wilson, her speech impaired by the stroke, but her venom intact. "Today, all of them, gone today." Marcus stepped around the corner and saw them through the glass door of the conference room. Brennan was at a laptop typing frantically, and there was Brenda in a wheelchair, her face partially paralyzed, but her eyes burning with the same hatred he remembered. Those eyes found him through the glass, and for a moment time stopped. Then Brenda's face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Marcus Jefferson," she said the words thick but clear. "Come in. Come see what you've made me." Marcus pushed open the door, keeping his hands visible, aware that Brennan had stopped typing and was reaching for something under the desk, pepper spray, a gun, he couldn't tell. "It's over, Brenda," Marcus said calmly. "The FBI knows you're here. They know about the fake medical transport. Catherine, whatever she's promised you, it's not worth it." Brennan laughed bitterly. "She promised me everything. Money, power, the ability to keep our neighborhoods pure. And she delivered until you—" "Stop," Brenda commanded, and despite her condition, the authority in her voice was absolute. She wheeled herself closer to Marcus, studying him like a specimen. "You think you won. You think you're hero. But look." She gestured weakly at the laptop screen. Marcus looked and felt his blood run cold. On the screen were financial records, but not just any records. They showed systematic theft from HOAs across the country, all traced back to accounts in his name. Forged documents that proved Marcus had been embezzling, that his whole crusade against Brenda had been to cover his own crimes. "Planted evidence won't work," Marcus said, though he felt a flutter of fear. "They'll know it's fake." "Will they?" Brenda slurred. "Black mechanic suddenly rich fighting noble fight, or clever thief covering tracks. Who will they believe when evidence is so good?" Marcus understood then. This wasn't just about driving out families anymore. This was about destroying him, discrediting everything he'd accomplished, turning him into the villain of the story. "You're really that petty?" Marcus asked. "You'd frame me just for revenge." "Not petty," Brenda managed. "Necessary. You made me symbol of hate. I make you symbol of greed. Balance." Catherine Brennan had pulled out a gun now, a small pistol that shook in her hands. "We just need to upload these files to the FBI database. Make it look like you hacked in to delete evidence of your crimes, but uploaded it by mistake. Then you disappear, and when they find you—" "When they find me what?" Marcus asked, stepping forward despite the gun. "Dead by suicide, overcome with guilt. Is that the plan?" Brennan's silence was confirmation enough. Marcus laughed, surprising them both. "You know what your problem is, Brenda. You always underestimated people. You thought fear was enough to control them. You thought paperwork was power, but you never understood community." "Community," Brenda spat the word like it was poison. "Yeah, community. See, while you were planning all this, my community was working too." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing them the recording app that had been running since he'd entered the building. "This is live streaming to 12 different platforms. Thousands of people are watching right now. Tim Chen's son Connor is a genius with technology. Every word you've said, every confession, it's all been broadcast." Brennan's face went white. She looked at the laptop, at the gun in her hand, at Brenda, who was struggling to process this information through her stroke-damaged brain. "You're lying," Brennan said, but her voice wavered. Marcus turned his phone around, showing the comment stream scrolling rapidly. "Check for yourself. Oh, and Director Lawson. She's watching too. In fact, she should be here right about—" The conference room door burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn. "Catherine Brennan, drop the weapon. Brenda Wilson, you're under arrest for escape from federal custody." Brennan dropped the gun, falling to her knees. But Brenda just sat in her wheelchair, staring at Marcus with pure hatred. "You think you've won," she said, each word a struggle. "But ideas don't die. There will be others." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but they'll know what happened to you. They'll know that communities can fight back, that documentation beats conversation, but solidarity beats everything." As the agents cuffed Brenda's hands to her wheelchair and led Brennan away, Director Lawson entered the room. "Mr. Jefferson, that was incredibly dangerous." "So was letting them continue," Marcus replied. "Did you get the evidence about the forged financial records?" "Every bit of it. Our tech team was able to trace their digital footprints. They've been at this for weeks, creating false evidence, not just against you, but against dozens of activists around the country." Marcus felt exhausted suddenly, the adrenaline leaving his system. So it's really over. This part is, Lawson said. Brenda Wilson will never see freedom again. Brennan and Kowalski will likely get decades. The Homeowners Heritage Foundation is officially designated as a hate group. But Mr. Jefferson, you've started something bigger than just stopping them. Outside, the sun was fully up now, and residents of Riverside Estates were gathering. They'd watched the live stream seeing the arrests. As Marcus emerged from the community center, they began to applaud. The Nguyen family was there, tears streaming down their faces. James Patterson was leaning on his walker, saluting. Maria Santos was holding her son, who was flapping his hands in excitement. A stim that would have gotten them fined under Brennan's rules, but was now just part of the community's fabric. Mr. Jefferson, Mrs. Nguyen called out. Thank you. You saved us. Marcus shook his head. You saved yourselves the moment you stood together. I just helped with the paperwork. The crowd laughed, tension finally breaking. Someone had brought coffee and donuts from a local shop. Someone else had set up speakers and was playing music. What had started as a morning of terror was transforming into an impromptu celebration. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Tim Chen. Watch the whole thing. You're either the bravest or stupidest person I know. Probably both. Party at your place tonight, Marcus typed back. My place. But you're bringing the beer. As Marcus walked back to his Camaro, Director Lawson followed. There's something else, Mr. Jefferson. The president watched your congressional testimony. She wants to appoint you to a new federal commission on housing discrimination. It would mean traveling, speaking, helping to shape policy. Marcus leaned against the Camaro, considering. I'm a mechanic director. I fix cars. You fixed a lot more than cars here, she pointed out. But I understand if you need time to think about it. Tell the president I'm honored, but I need to talk to my community first. We make decisions together now. Lawson smiled. That's exactly the answer I'd expect from you. As she walked away to coordinate the crime scene processing, Marcus noticed Ashley Wilson standing at the edge of the crowd. She looked lost, uncertain. He walked over to her. You okay? She shook her head. My mother's going to die in prison now. The stroke, the additional charges. I know she deserves it, but she's still my mother. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. Family is complicated. You can love someone and hate what they've done. You can mourn the mother you wished you had while being glad the monster she became is stopped. How do you not let it break you? Ashley asked. You don't let it define you. You choose who you want to be every day. And from what I've seen, you've chosen to be someone your mother could never understand, someone who stands for justice even when it costs everything. Ashley wiped her tears. I got into law school, by the way. Full scholarship. They specifically mentioned my work exposing the HOA corruption. That's amazing, Ashley. You're going to be a hell of a lawyer. I want to be the kind who prevents people like my mother from hurting others, who makes sure everyone really does have fair housing. Marcus smiled. Then you will be. The drive back to Willowbrook was surreal. The morning DJ was talking about the live stream, which had now been viewed over 1 million times. Social media was exploding with #CamaroJustice hashtags. Marcus's phone rang constantly until he finally turned it off, needing silence to process everything. When he pulled into his driveway, the entire neighborhood was waiting. Someone had hung a massive banner across his garage, "Welcome Home Hero." The elderly Mrs. Patterson was directing people setting up tables for what was clearly going to be an epic block party. The Patels were already cooking the smell of curry mixing with barbecue from the Chen's grill. I leave for a few hours and you all lose your minds, Marcus called out, getting out of the Camaro. Few hours, Mr. Rodriguez laughed. You took down a criminal conspiracy on live stream. My grandson says you're trending worldwide. Jorge had closed the shop for the day and brought the entire crew. Boss, you've got to stop making the rest of us look bad. How am I supposed to compete with taking down racist HOAs and saving neighborhoods? By doing the brake job on Mrs. Patterson's Buick that I was supposed to do today, Marcus replied, which got a laugh from everyone. As the party kicked into high gear, Marcus found a quiet moment to slip into his garage. The Camaro sat there patient as always, a silent witness to everything that had happened. He ran his hand along its hood, feeling the smooth paint his father had helped him apply. We did it, Dad, he said quietly. We really did it. Tim Chen found him there. hiding from your own party. Just needed a minute, it's been a crazy morning. Crazy, you're more like it. From a false police report about your car to taking down a nationwide discrimination network. That's quite a journey. Marcus nodded. And it all started with Brenda not believing I could own this car. No, Tim corrected. It started with you refusing to be driven out. Most people would have just moved, sold the house found somewhere else, but you stayed and fought. This is my home, Marcus said simply. You don't run from your home. Deshawn arrived then carrying a thick folder. Sorry to interrupt the celebration, but this couldn't wait. Remember those forged financial records they were creating to frame you? Marcus tensed. Yeah. Well, the FBI traced them back, and in doing so, they uncovered something huge. The Homeowners Heritage Foundation has been operating for over 15 years. They've driven out hundreds of families, stolen millions in equity, and Deshawn paused for effect. Several major mortgage companies were complicit. They're looking at RICO charges now. RICO like organized crime RICO. Exactly like that. Marcus, you didn't just stop Brenda Wilson. You exposed an entire system. The Attorney General is calling it one of the largest housing discrimination conspiracies in modern history. Marcus sat down on his workbench, overwhelmed. I just wanted to live in peace with my car. And now thousands of families will be able to live in peace because you wouldn't back down, Deshawn said. Oh, and there's going to be a settlement, a big one. Every affected family, including you, is looking at significant compensation. I don't want money, Marcus said immediately. That's not what this was about. Then donate it, Tim suggested. Start a fund for families facing HOA discrimination. Use Brenda's downfall to prevent future Brendas. Marcus liked that idea. Turning something born of hate into something that promoted justice. His father would have appreciated the poetry of it. The party lasted well into the night. At one point, someone had set up a projector to replay the morning's live stream. Watching it from the outside, Marcus could hardly believe he'd been that calm, facing down a gun and two desperate criminals. Margaret Thornton, Brenda's mother, arrived as the sun was setting. The crowd went quiet when she appeared, unsure how to react to the mother of their tormentor. Mrs. Thornton, Marcus greeted her. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did, she said firmly. I needed to apologize, not just for Brenda, but for myself. For staying silent when my husband filled her head with poison. For choosing comfort over conscience. For being the kind of person who would have called the police on you myself 20 years ago. The honesty was brutal, but Marcus appreciated it. We all have the capacity for growth, Mrs. Thornton. Please call me Margaret, and I want you to know I'm selling everything. The houses, the investments, all of it. The money will go to fair housing organizations. It won't undo the damage, but maybe it can prevent future harm. The crowd began to warm to her then, seeing genuine remorse and action behind it. Mrs. Patel brought her a plate of food. Mr. Rodriguez offered her a chair. The community that Brenda had tried to destroy with division was healing through inclusion. As midnight approached and the party wound down, Marcus found himself sitting on his porch with his inner circle, Tim, Amy, Deshawn, Janet, Mr. Rodriguez, and Ashley. They were quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about the journey they'd taken together. You know what I keep thinking about? Janet said. How many Willowbrooks are out there? How many neighborhoods where this is happening, but nobody's fighting back? Thousands, Amy said. Based on the data I've seen, probably thousands. So what do we do about it? Mr. Rodriguez asked. Marcus was about to answer when his phone buzzed with an email from Director Lawson. He read it and started laughing. What? Tim asked. The president isn't just creating a commission. She's introducing legislation, the Marcus Jefferson Fair Housing and HOAs Act. Federal oversight, civil rights protections, criminal penalties for discrimination, and mandatory transparency for all HOA operations. They're naming it after you, Ashley said, amazed. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. Apparently, though I had nothing to do with that. You had everything to do with it, Deshawn corrected. You're the face of this fight now, whether you wanted to be or not. Marcus thought about that responsibility, the weight of representing not just his own struggle, but the struggles of countless families across the country. It should have felt overwhelming, but instead it felt right. His father had taught him to fix things properly, not just patch them temporarily. This was fixing things on a scale he'd never imagined. "So," Tim asked, "are you going to accept the president's commission appointment?" Marcus looked at each of his friends, his chosen family, forged in the fire of injustice. "What do you all think?" "Take it, Mr." Rodriguez said immediately. "But don't forget us little people when you're making federal policy." "Take it," Janet agreed. "But keep the shop. Stay grounded in the community." "Take it," Ashley added. "Show them that real change comes from people who've lived the struggle, not just studied it." Marcus nodded. "Then I'll take it. But I'm keeping the shop. I'm keeping the house. And I'm keeping the Camaro right here where everyone can see it. Let it remind everyone that we fought for this neighborhood and won." "To Marcus." Tim raised his beer. "To all of us," Marcus corrected. "To Willowbrook. To every neighborhood fighting for justice. To the idea that home is worth fighting for." They toasted under the stars in a neighborhood that had been transformed from a place of fear to a beacon of hope. The Camaro sat in the open garage, its chrome gleaming under the streetlights, a symbol of resistance that had become a symbol of victory. But even in victory, Marcus knew the work wasn't done. There would be the commission, the legislation to fight for the testimonies, to give the communities to help. Brenda Wilson was finished, but the systems that created her, enabled her, and protected her still existed. "Hey, Marcus," Ashley said as everyone was leaving. "I've been thinking, when I finish law school, I want to start a legal clinic. Free representation for families facing HOA discrimination. Would you be willing to be on the board?" Marcus smiled. "Only if we can hold the board meetings in my garage." She laughed. "Deal." As the last of his friends headed home, Marcus stood alone in his driveway, looking at his house, his garage, his neighborhood. 6 months ago, Brenda Wilson had stood in this very spot, accusing him of stealing his own car, trying to drive him from his own home. Now she was headed back to federal prison, this time for life, and he was about to help shape federal policy. His phone buzzed with one final message of the night. It was from Ronald Morse, the former HOA treasurer, who'd first tried to expose Brenda writing from his new home back in Willowbrook. "Watch the live stream. Your father would be so proud. You didn't just fix cars, son. You fixed America one neighborhood at a time." Marcus typed back, "Not fixed yet, but we're working on it." He covered the Camaro one last time, turned off the garage lights, and headed inside. Tomorrow he'd be back under a car covered in grease, doing what he loved. But he'd also be something more, a voice for the voiceless, a defender of home, a mechanic who'd learned that sometimes the most important things to fix aren't made of metal. The house was quiet, peaceful, in a way it hadn't been since this all started. Marcus sat at his kitchen table and pulled out a legal pad. At the top, he wrote Federal Commission goals. Then he began to list everything he wanted to accomplish, every protection he wanted to ensure, every barrier he wanted to remove. It was nearly 3 a.m. when he finally went to bed, the same time Director Lawson had called to start this final confrontation. But this time, Marcus slept peacefully, knowing that Brenda Wilson's reign of terror was truly over, and that from its ashes, something better was being built. The morning sunlight streaming through Marcus's bedroom window felt different, somehow lighter, as if even the sun knew that the shadow over Willowbrook had finally lifted. Marcus stretched his body, still aching from the tension of the previous day's confrontation, but his mind was clear for the first time in months. He reached for his phone to check the time and found 247 missed calls, 500 text messages, and enough emails to crash a lesser device. "Jesus," he muttered, scrolling through the notifications. CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. NPR, every major news outlet wanted an interview. There were messages from civil rights organizations, publishers wanting book deals, and even a Hollywood producer claiming he wanted to make Marcus's story into a movie. Marcus deleted them all without reading and called the one person whose opinion actually mattered to him. "Grandma, you watching the news?" Eleanor Jefferson's voice was warm with pride. "Baby, I've been watching since 4 a.m. Every channel's talking about my grandson. Your daddy's probably dancing in heaven right now." "It's a lot, Grandma. Maybe too much." "Nothing's too much when you're doing right. But Marcus, remember what I told you when your daddy passed. The work isn't finished just because the fighting's done. Now comes the harder part, building something better from the rubble." After promising to visit her that weekend, Marcus headed to his garage. The Camaro sat there patient as always, morning dew beating on its covered form. He pulled off the cover and ran his hand along the hood, grounding himself in the familiar ritual. "Marcus," Jorge's voice called from the driveway. "Boss, we got a problem at the shop." Marcus's heart sank. Had Brenda's network retaliated somehow? He grabbed his keys, but Jorge quickly waved him off. No, nothing bad. It's just, there's about 200 people there, all wanting to shake your hand, get pictures with you. Mrs. Patterson's been directing traffic for an hour. Marcus arrived at Jefferson Automotive to find it transformed into something resembling a pilgrimage site. Cars lined up for blocks, news vans clustered in the parking lot, and indeed, Mrs. Patterson stood in the middle of it all with a clipboard organizing the chaos with military precision. 15-minute intervals, she was announcing. "Mr. Jefferson will see everyone, but you must wait your turn. And if you're here for actual automotive service line forms, to the left." "Mrs. P," Marcus said, approaching her. "What are you doing?" "What needs doing?" she replied matter-of-factly. "You've got 17 cars actually needing service, 43 people wanting to thank you personally, and 6 more job applications from mechanics wanting to work for the hero of Willowbrook. I've been prioritizing." Marcus looked at the crowd, families he'd never met, all wearing expressions of hope and gratitude. One woman held a sign that read, "You saved our HOA too." An elderly man had driven his own classic car, a 1965 Mustang with "Thank you, Marcus" painted on the windshield. "This is insane," Marcus said to Jorge. "This is America, boss. You stood up to bullies, and everyone's got a bully they wish they could stand up to." Marcus spent the morning trying to work while accommodating the stream of well-wishers. He changed oil with cameras rolling rotated tires while answering questions about federal policy and diagnosed a transmission problem while 3 different documentary crews filmed him. It was nearly noon when a familiar face appeared in the crowd. Detective Murray, the same officer who had dismissed the vandalism charges against Brenda months ago. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight as he approached. "Mr. Jefferson, I owe you an apology." Marcus straightened from the engine he was examining. "Detective, I knew something was wrong. The complaints against you, the vandalism, all of it, but Murray paused, struggling. "My son worked at that law firm. I thought I was protecting him. I didn't realize I was enabling something much worse. And now my son's looking for a new job because he refuses to work for criminals. And I'm here to say I'm sorry. What you did standing up when the whole system was against you, that took more courage than I had." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, considering. "We all make choices, Detective. The question is what we do once we realize we chose wrong." Murray nodded. "I've requested a transfer to the Civil Rights Division. Figure it's time I actually protected and served everyone, not just the powerful." After Murray left, Marcus noticed another unexpected visitor, Thomas Kowalski. Catherine Brennan's husband, standing by an expensive BMW, his designer suit wrinkled, his face haggard. Marcus tensed, but Jorge and several customers immediately moved closer, protective. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Kowalski said quickly, hands raised. "I'm here to... Christ, I don't even know how to say this." "Then maybe you shouldn't," Jorge suggested, not kindly. "No, let him speak," Marcus said, curious despite himself. Kowalski took a breath. "My wife is going to prison for 20 years. My firm is destroyed. We're bankrupt. The civil suits will take everything. And you know what? We deserve it, every bit of it." "If you're looking for sympathy," Marcus began. "I'm not. I'm looking for understanding, maybe. How did we become those people, Catherine and I? We started out as public defenders. We wanted to help people. Then somewhere along the way, we got seduced by money, by power, by the idea that we deserved better than others. Brenda Wilson didn't corrupt us. We were already corrupt. She just gave us permission to show it." Marcus studied the broken man before him. "What do you want from me, Kowalski?" "Nothing. I just wanted you to know that your testimony, your stand, it woke some of us up, made us see what we'd become. I'm testifying for the prosecution now, full cooperation. It won't undo the harm, but maybe it'll prevent future harm." "Maybe," Marcus said noncommittally. Kowalski turned to leave, then stopped. That car of yours, the Camaro Catherine, always said it was too nice for someone like you. But the truth was, we were too small to appreciate something built with that much love. As Kowalski drove away, Mrs. Patterson appeared at Marcus's elbow. You're too kind, letting him speak his piece. Grandma always said the best revenge is living well while your enemies watch, Marcus replied. Besides, broken people sometimes have the most to teach us about how not to break. The afternoon brought a surprise visit from Representative Jackson, the committee chair who had overseen Marcus's congressional testimony. She arrived in a modest sedan, no fanfare, accompanied only by Director Lawson. Mr. Jefferson, I wanted to deliver this personally, she said, handing him an official envelope. The president signed it this morning. Marcus opened it carefully. Inside was his official appointment to the Federal Commission on Fair Housing Practices, along with a personal note from the president. Mr. Jefferson, America needs more mechanics, people who fix what's broken instead of just talking about it. Thank you for your service to our nation's ideals. The first meeting is next month in D.C., Representative Jackson explained. But we want you to know this isn't a ceremonial position. You'll have real input on real policy. The Marcus Jefferson Act is just the beginning. I'm still running my shop, Marcus said firmly. We wouldn't want it any other way. Stay connected to your community. That's where your strength comes from. After they left, Marcus found himself alone in the shop for the first time all day. He sat on his workbench, overwhelmed by the trajectory his life had taken. 6 months ago, his biggest concern was getting the right shade of red for the Camaro's touch-up paint. Now he was shaping federal policy. His phone rang. It was Ashley Wilson, and she sounded excited. Marcus, you need to see this. Can you come to the community center? When Marcus arrived, he found the Willowbrook Community Center transformed. What had been a sterile, intimidating space under Brenda's rule was now warm and welcoming. Children's artwork covered the walls. Multiple languages appeared on every sign. And in the main hall, Ashley stood with a group of law students and young lawyers. We did it, she announced. The Willowbrook Legal Defense Clinic, free representation for anyone facing housing discrimination. We've got 14 volunteer lawyers, 20 law students, and our first 3 cases already. Marcus looked around the room at the eager young faces all ready to fight for justice. This is incredible, Ashley. It gets better. Remember Margaret Thornton's donation? She gave us enough to run for 10 years. And look at our first case. She handed him a file. It was a family in Texas facing HOA harassment nearly identical to what Willowbrook had experienced. The clinic was already preparing their defense using everything learned from Marcus's fight. We're calling it the Jefferson Protocol, one of the law students explained. Document everything, build community support, go public when necessary, and never back down. Marcus had to sit down, moved beyond words. His fight was becoming a template for others. His pain was becoming their power. That evening, the neighborhood held another gathering, this one more subdued but no less meaningful. They met in Marcus's garage, the core group that had weathered the storm together. Tim and Amy Chen, the Patels, Janet Morrison, Mr. Rodriguez, and Deshawn. Ashley was there too, having earned her place in their chosen family. So what happens now? Priya Patel asked. We won. Brenda's gone forever laws are changing. Do we just go back to normal? There is no normal anymore, Tim said. We're different now. The neighborhood's different. Better different, Mr. Rodriguez added. My granddaughter asked me what it was like before all this. I couldn't even explain it. The fear, the isolation, the way we all stayed in our boxes. That feels like a different lifetime. Janet had been quiet, but now she spoke up. I've been thinking about running for city council. Someone needs to make sure what happened here doesn't happen elsewhere in our city. You'd have my vote, Marcus said immediately, and everyone agreed. And I'm starting a neighborhood youth program, Amy Chen announced, teaching kids about financial literacy, civil rights, and civic engagement. Marcus, I'm hoping you'll do a monthly session on problem solving and standing up for yourself. Of course, Marcus agreed, though I'm not sure I'm the best role model. Are you kidding? Deshawn laughed. You're literally going to have a federal law named after you. You're everyone's role model now. As the evening wore on and stories were shared, Marcus noticed Margaret Thornton standing at the edge of his driveway, hesitant to approach. He walked over to her. Margaret, you're welcome here. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. I shouldn't be. My family caused so much pain. Your daughter caused pain. You're trying to heal it. That matters. Margaret pulled out a worn photo from her purse. It showed a much younger Brenda, maybe 7 years old, playing with a black girl at a playground. This was before her father filled her head with poison. She was just a little girl who didn't see color, just a friend. I keep wondering where that little girl went. Marcus looked at the photo, seeing the innocence that had been corrupted. Sometimes people choose hate because it's easier than choosing love. Love requires work, understanding, growth. Hate just requires fear. I'm selling the family estate, Margaret said suddenly. 20 acres in the countryside. I want to turn it into a retreat center for families affected by housing discrimination. A place where they can heal, organize, plan. Would you consider being on the board? Marcus thought about the irony, Brenda's childhood home becoming a haven for the people she'd tried to destroy. I think that would be a beautiful form of justice. As the gathering wound down, Marcus found himself alone with the Camaro again. He'd lost count of how many quiet moments he'd spent with this car, how many problems he'd solved while polishing its chrome, how many memories were locked in its steel frame. You started all this, he said to the car. If Brenda hadn't been so offended by you, none of this would have happened. Talking to cars now, Tim asked, returning for a forgotten phone. That's either wisdom or madness. Probably both, Marcus admitted. Tim, do you ever think about how different things would be if I just moved when Brenda started harassing me? Tim considered this. You wouldn't have exposed a national conspiracy. Hundreds of families would still be suffering. Laws wouldn't be changing. But more importantly, Marcus, you wouldn't be you. The man who stands up, who fights back, who fixes things, that's who you are. Brenda just gave you a stage to show it. After Tim left, Marcus's phone buzzed with a video message from Connor Chen. The teenager had compiled footage from the past 6 months, news reports, security cameras, phone videos into a documentary he was submitting for his college applications. Marcus watched his own journey unfold on the small screen. The fear in his eyes during that first false police report. The determination as he gathered evidence. The exhaustion during the trial. The triumph when Brenda was convicted. And finally, this morning's confrontation with Brenda and Brennan, his calm voice cutting through their hatred. The video ended with a shot of Willowbrook today, children playing freely, neighbors talking across fence lines, the community garden thriving where Brenda's rigid rules once reigned. Connor's voiceover concluded, "This is what happens when one person refuses to be driven from their home. This is what happens when a community chooses love over fear." Marcus was wiping his eyes when his phone rang. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. Mr. Jefferson. This is Michael Chen. No relation to your neighbor. I'm a prosecutor in San Francisco. We have an HOA situation here that's almost identical to what you faced. 27 families, all minorities, being systematically harassed. We've been following your case using your methods. I'm calling because we need help. Would you consider consulting? Marcus looked at his calendar. Between the shop, the federal commission, and the local initiatives, he barely had time to breathe. But then he thought about those 27 families living in fear, like Willowbrook once had. Send me the files, he said. I'll review them tonight. Thank you. You don't know what this means. Actually, I do, Marcus replied. That's why I'm helping. The next few days blurred together. Marcus tried to maintain normalcy at the shop, but the requests for help kept coming. HOAs in Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Florida, all reaching out, all dealing with discrimination, all needing guidance. Marcus found himself becoming an inadvertent expert consulting by phone between oil changes. Deshaun suggested he write a handbook, something people could reference. Call it the Homeowner's Defense Guide or something. Turn your experience into a tool others can use. When would I have time to write a book? Marcus asked, gesturing at the stack of consultation requests. That's what ghostwriters are for, Deshaun replied. But the knowledge, the experience, that's all you. It was Ashley who came up with the solution. She arrived at the shop with 3 law students and a proposal. We'll handle the initial consultations, organize the information, identify patterns. You review and provide guidance on the complex cases. It's like triage, but for civil rights. And so without meaning to, Marcus found himself running an informal national consulting service from his auto shop. Jorge joked that they should add ISIS and civil rights to the Jefferson Automotive sign. A week after Brenda's final arrest, Marcus received an unexpected call from the federal prison where she was being held. It was the warden. "Mr. Jefferson, I have an unusual request. Brenda Wilson wants to speak with you." Marcus's immediate instinct was to refuse, but curiosity won. "Just speak. She can barely write since the stroke. She's requested a video call. You're under no obligation and we'd monitor everything for security." Marcus thought about it for a long moment. "Set it up." The video call was scheduled for that evening. Marcus sat in his home office looking at the screen as it connected. When Brenda appeared, he barely recognized her. The stroke had aged her dramatically. Her once perfect hair was gray and unkempt. The right side of her face drooped, but her eyes still burned with that familiar intensity. "Marcus," she said his name, slurred but understandable. "Brenda, what do you want?" She struggled to form words, frustration evident. "You won." "This wasn't a game, Brenda. People's lives were at stake." "My life ruined." "You ruined your own life the moment you chose hate over humanity." She was quiet for a moment, then, "The car. Your car. What about it?" "Beautiful car. Always was. Hated that you had it. Hated that you deserved it." Marcus leaned back, understanding. "It was never about the car, was it? It was about me having something you thought I shouldn't have." "Yes," she admitted, the word heavy with defeat. "Thought people like you should know their place. My place is in my home, in my community with my neighbors. The place I earned through hard work and integrity. The place you tried to steal." Brenda's face contorted, maybe with emotion, maybe just the stroke. "Will you forgive?" The question hung in the air. Marcus thought about all the pain she'd caused the families, destroyed the lives, upended. But he also thought about his grandmother's words about forgiveness being for the forgiver, not the forgiven. "I forgive you, Brenda. Not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying hate would make me like you, and I refuse to be like you." She started crying, then ugly sobs from a broken woman. "I'm sorry. Are you just sorry you got caught?" "Both," she admitted. "Started as one, becoming other. Then maybe there's hope for you yet. But Brenda, that hope has to come from inside you. You have to choose to be better even if you'll never be free." The call ended shortly after. Marcus sat in the darkness for a while, processing. He'd faced his tormentor and found not a monster, but a pathetic, broken person consumed by her own hatred. It didn't excuse anything, but it did provide closure. The next morning brought news that the Marcus Jefferson Fair Housing and HOAs Act had passed its first committee vote. It was moving faster than anyone expected, driven by public outrage over the continuing revelations about the Homeowners Heritage Foundation. Marcus was under a Civic changing brake pads and listening to the news when Sarah Kim arrived with her camera crew. "One last interview," she promised, "for the documentary finale." Marcus rolled out from under the car, wiping his hands. "What's left to say? How it ends? Or really how it begins? Because this isn't an ending, is it?" Marcus looked around his shop at the cars waiting for repair, at the stack of consultation requests, at the photo of his father hanging on the wall. "No, it's not an ending. It's a transformation. We went from being victims to being victors to being protectors. Now we make sure no one else goes through what we did." "Any regrets?" Sarah asked. "Just one. I wish my dad could see this. He always said the Camaro would take me places. I don't think either of us imagined it would take me here." The interview continued for an hour, covering everything from the technical details of the legal fight to the emotional toll on the community. But it was Marcus's final answer that would become the documentary's most quoted moment. "What would you say to someone facing discrimination in their HOA right now?" Marcus looked directly into the camera. "Document everything. Build allies. Don't let them isolate you. And remember, your home is your right, not their privilege to grant or deny. Stand your ground. We're with you." That afternoon, a surprise visitor arrived at the shop, the President of the United States. No motorcade, no fanfare, just a small security detail and a genuine desire to meet Marcus. "Mr. Jefferson," she said, shaking his hand with grease still under his fingernails. "I wanted to thank you personally. You've done more for civil rights and housing than decades of legislation accomplished. I just refuse to be driven from my home, Madam President." That's like saying Rosa Parks just refused to give up her seat. Sometimes the simplest acts of defiance create the biggest changes. She toured the shop genuinely interested in the work, even helping Marcus check the oil on Mrs. Patterson's Buick. The photo of the President of the United States holding a dipstick while Marcus explained proper maintenance would become one of the most shared images of her presidency. "The commission meets next month," she reminded him as she prepared to leave. "We need your voice, Marcus. The authentic voice of someone who's lived this fight." "I'll be there," Marcus promised. "But I'll probably have oil under my fingernails there, too." "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." That evening, Willowbrook held its first official Freedom Festival, a celebration of their victory and a commitment to maintaining their inclusive community. The street was closed off, tables set up, music playing. Every culture in the neighborhood contributed food music stories. Marcus found himself standing with Mr. Rodriguez watching children play Black, White, Asian, Latino, all together, no one questioning who belonged. "You know what I realized," Mr. Rodriguez said. "Brenda Wilson gave us a gift." Marcus looked at him skeptically. "A gift?" "She showed us what we could be when we stood together. Without her hatred, we might have stayed friendly strangers. Because of it, we became family." It was a profound thought. Brenda's attempt to divide had ultimately united them stronger than ever. As the festival continued, Marcus noticed a moving truck at the old Wilson house. New owners were moving in, a young interracial couple with twin toddlers. The husband was Black, the wife Korean, and they looked nervous as they watched the party. Marcus walked over. "Welcome to Willowbrook. I'm Marcus Jefferson." The man's eyes widened. "The Marcus Jefferson." "Oh man, we know all about you. You're why we chose this neighborhood. We wanted to raise our kids somewhere that fought for inclusion." "Well, you came to the right place. Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." As Marcus led them into the party, he saw Margaret Thornton helping them with a box, Ashley Wilson playing with their children, and the entire neighborhood opening their arms to welcome the new family. Later, as the party wound down, Marcus stood in his garage one more time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the commission meeting to prepare for consultations to handle cars to fix. The work would never really be done. But tonight, in this moment, Marcus allowed himself to feel the victory fully. He'd saved his home, his neighborhood, and potentially thousands of other homes across the country. The kid who'd learned to turn wrenches at his father's side had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon of hope, and a defender of the American dream's true promise that everyone deserves a place to call home. Tim Chen appeared with 2 beers, as had become their tradition. "You know what I just realized?" Tim said. "Your dad's watch, you haven't checked it once tonight." Marcus looked down at his father's Timex, still keeping perfect time. "I guess I haven't needed to. For the first time in months, I'm not counting the minutes until the next crisis." "Because there won't be any more." "No, there will always be crises, but now we know we can handle them, together." They clinked bottles and watched the last of the party cleanup. Children were being carried home, asleep in their parents' arms. Elderly neighbors were being helped to their doors. The community was taking care of itself naturally, without rules or enforcement. "Hey Marcus," Tim said, "that first day when Brenda called the cops on you, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this?" Marcus thought about it. "No, I just wanted to polish my car in peace. But maybe that's how all important fights start. Someone just wants to live their life and someone else says they can't. And instead of accepting it, they stand up and say, 'Yes, I can.'" As Tim headed home and Marcus prepared to close the garage, he took one last look at the Camaro. Tomorrow, weather permitting, he'd take it for a drive. Not to show off, not to make a statement, but just to enjoy the car he and his father had built together. The car that had started a revolution by simply existing where someone thought it shouldn't. He covered it gently, like tucking in a child, and turned off the lights. Through his window, he could see the neighborhood settling into peaceful sleep. Porch lights were on, but not out of fear, out of welcome. The street that had once been divided by suspicion was now united by trust. Marcus's phone buzzed with one last message of the day. It was from a HOA president in Minnesota. "We just voted to implement the Jefferson Protocol preemptively. No discrimination on our watch. Thank you for showing us the way." Marcus smiled and typed back, "The way was always there. Sometimes it just takes someone refusing to move to help others see it." As he headed to bed, Marcus passed the framed photo of his father in the hallway. "We did it, Dad. We fixed more than just cars. We fixed a piece of America." And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Marcus was certain his father was smiling proud that his son had used the tools he'd been given, not just wrenches and screwdrivers, but courage and conviction to repair something that had been broken for far too long. The house was quiet. The neighborhood was safe. And for the first time since that day, Brenda Wilson had stood in his driveway making false accusations. Marcus Jefferson slept without worry, knowing that home, his home, everyone's home, was finally truly secure.